I was just making my way down the street, lost in the quiet hum of the afternoon, when two young women I'd never laid eyes on before suddenly appeared, calling out my name with an almost desperate urgency. Ryan, one of them blurted, her voice tight with a peculiar blend of panic and pleading. This is going to sound incredibly strange, impossibly weird, but our best friend's baby shower is happening right now. Please, we're begging you, could you possibly pretend to be her boyfriend, the father of the baby? My immediate reaction was a jolt of disbelief, a sudden, jarring halt to my mundane stroll. I did an involuntary double take, my mind struggling to process such an outlandish request from complete strangers. Their faces, etched with a raw, undeniable desperation, told a story more profound than their words. They quickly launched into a frantic explanation, detailing how their friend's ex, a man whose sanity they clearly questioned, was a truly unhinged individual. He had, they recounted with genuine terror in their eyes, previously attempted to burn their house down while she was still inside. And now, with a chilling precision, he was due to arrive at exactly 3 p.m., intent on reclaiming what's his. The words hung in the air, heavy with a possessive menace. It was to 15 p.m. Now, a mere 45 minutes before the storm. A chaotic chorus of questions erupted in my mind. How on earth do you even know my name? It was a thought so immediate, so fundamental to the sheer absurdity of the situation. One of them, perhaps sensing my bewilderment, pointed to my gym bag flying over my shoulder. Your gym bag, she explained, a quick, almost apologetic gesture towards the small, personalized tag. Please, she implored again, her voice cracking slightly. I, standing at a solid 6 feet 4 inches, with a build that, admittedly, might suggest I favor nails for breakfast, could surmise why they'd zeroed in on me. I certainly wasn't small, nor did I project an easily intimidated air. But this request, this entire scenario bordered on the utterly insane. Every fiber of logic screamed at me to turn and walk away, to distance myself from this unfolding drama. Yet, against the insistent rationality of my own thoughts, a strange, inexplicable pull, perhaps fueled by their palpable fear and the sheer audacity of it all, drew me in. I found myself nodding, then following them, a willing, if bewildered, participant, into a house that was a vibrant explosion of pink balloons and cheerful "It's a baby girl" banners a stark, unsettling contrast to the grim reality lurking just beneath the surface. Stepping into the living room felt like walking onto a stage where I hadn't rehearsed my lines. The room, overflowing with women, went abruptly silent. Every single head turned, a sea of curious, anxious, and frankly, bewildered gazes fixed solely on me. It was in that moment, as the collective silence pressed in, that my eyes finally landed on her. Becky from my comparative literature class, sophomore year. The Becky I'd spent an entire semester covertly admiring, painstakingly trying to muster the courage to even utter a simple hello. And here she was, 8 months pregnant, looking undeniably exhausted, yet still possessing that familiar, captivating spark. It felt less like fate and more like the universe's most elaborate, cruel joke, the punchline still dangling tantalizingly out of reach. Everyone, one of the girls announced, her voice attempting an air of normalcy that didn't quite land. This is Ryan. The father, Becky's eyes, already wide with the strain of the day, widened further as she recognized me. A flash of shock, then a flicker of understanding, and with an incredible presence of mind, she played along beautifully. Hey, babe, she murmured, her voice soft, almost a whisper, as if the words themselves were foreign on her tongue. It was a performance, and a rather convincing one, given the circumstances. Her friend, the one who'd first called my name, quickly pulled me aside, her voice dropping to a low, urgent murmur. Richard's been sending videos all morning, she confided, her eyes darting nervously towards the front door. He's completely unhinged, truly unstable. Just stand there, look protective. Be her shield. We just need you to look intimidating until he shows up and, more importantly, until he leaves. So I found myself standing by Becky's chair, a silent, imposing guardian, as she valiantly attempted to open a pile of baby shower presents. The party, despite the vibrant decorations and celebratory purpose, tried desperately to feel normal, but an undeniable, thick tension permeated the air. A collective apprehension that vibrated just beneath the surface of polite smiles and muffled chatter. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, vibrating insistently against the table. With a hesitant glance at me, Becky showed me the screen. It was another video from Richard, his face distorted by the poor phone quality, sneering into the camera. His voice, laden with a chilling blend of possessiveness and threat, declared, "On my way to get what's mine. Hope you didn't think you could replace me." A shiver traced its way down my spine. "This is the 6th one today," Becky whispered, her voice barely audible, the weariness in her eyes deepening with each threat. Nearby, an older woman, perhaps an aunt, leaned in conspiratorially to another guest, her voice hushed, but clear enough to carry. "Remember when Richard threw that bottle at her head at Christmas?" The casual delivery of such a horrific detail was jarring, painting an even darker picture of the man we were all bracing ourselves for. Becky's mom, a woman whose face was a roadmap of warring lines, approached me, her eyes brimming with a fragile gratitude. "Thank you for doing this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The last time he showed up somewhere uninvited, he broke her friend's nose for trying to intervene." The words were a stark, terrifying warning, underscoring the very real danger we were up against. At 2:30 p.m., another video notification flashed on Becky's phone. This one showed Richard casually cruising in his truck, the implication being that he was already on his way, perhaps even circling the neighborhood. The accompanying text was a direct, chilling ultimatum. Tell everyone to clear out unless they want problems. The room, already quiet, fell into an even deeper, almost suffocating silence. Head subtly turned as darting towards the windows, as if expecting to see him materialize at any moment. Then, at 2:40 p.m., another text. Nice pink decorations. Almost there, it was a taunt, a macabre acknowledgement of the festive, vulnerable setting. A friend nearby murmured, her voice barely a breath. He knows which house. He's probably driving by. The realization hung heavy, a cloak of paranoia descending over the gathering. Becky, her hands visibly trembling, tried to focus on opening a tiny baby onesie, but her efforts were futile. Her focus shattered. Last time he came to a party, someone whispered, the words like a ghost in a hushed room, for people went to Dia. The statement hung there, a grim harbinger. At 2:50 p.m., Becky's phone rang, a shrill, unwelcome intrusion. In her agitated state, she accidentally put it on speaker. Richard's voice, calm and laced with an unnerving possessiveness, filled the room. I see you have people over. That's cute. 10 minutes, the final countdown. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The entire party, as if moved by an invisible, instinctual wave, shifted away from the front of the house. Women, their faces etched with fear, began grabbing their children, ushering them silently, swiftly, into the safety of back rooms. Should we call the police now? Becky's mom asked, her voice cracking with desperation. Aghast, her face grim, responded, they won't come until something happens. We've tried before. It was a bleak, chilling assessment of their helplessness. At 2:55 p.m., a text message arrived with a photo, a clear, undeniable picture of this very house from the outside. The message that followed was a direct, personal challenge to me. I counted about 20 cards. Hope your new man is ready. Becky instinctively moved, pressing herself close behind me, seeking the protection my imposing frame offered. The room was absolutely silent, save for the faint, unsettling babble of a kid's cartoon playing forgotten in the background. Then, at precisely 3 p.m., it began. The roar of a truck engine outside, revving aggressively, then a blast of music, abruptly cut off. Heavy, deliberate footsteps thudded on the porch. There was no polite knock. The door simply, jarringly, opened. Richard walked in, not with an invitation, but with the arrogant swagger of someone who believed he owned the very ground he trod upon. He was tall, perhaps 6'4", his neck adorned with prominent tattoos, a tank top revealing military ink that snaked across his muscular arms. His eyes, cold and assessing, swept across the room, ignoring the terrified faces of the women, until they landed, with a chilling certainty, on me. So, he began, his voice disconcertingly calm, a tone that was somehow far more menacing than any shout. You're the replacement. He took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. I'm here for Becky. You need to leave. He scoffed, a short, dismissive laugh. They hired security. That's adorable. My jaw tightened. I'm not security, I stated, my voice low and steady, radiating a controlled intensity. I'm the father. His entire demeanor shifted in an instant. The amusement vanished, replaced by a sudden, deadly rage. His face contorted, morphing from a smug smirk into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. The F you just say. Becky, with an astonishing surge of courage, stepped slightly out from behind me. You heard him, Richard, she declared, her voice stronger than I had anticipated. That's my kid, Becky. For years together, he growled, clinging to a past that was no longer his. No, Richard, we broke up 10 months ago. Do the math. He took another aggressive step forward, but I moved swiftly, blocking his path, my body in a yielding wall between him and Becky. This is a family event, I stated, my voice firm, allowing no room for argument. You're not family. Family, he sneered, looking around the room, as if trying to rally the terrified guests to his side. These people watched me and her for years, tell him. He demanded, pointing a finger at the assembled women. Tell him whose baby that is. It was Becky's mom who answered, her voice like tempered steel, cutting through the tense air. Someone who isn't welcome in my home. Richard's face flushed a furious red. You old, he began, but I stepped directly in front of him, closer now, our chests almost touching. My eyes locked onto his, conveying an unspoken warning. Watch your mouth, I growled, a primal instinct to protect surging through me. He finally looked up, truly seeing the significant size difference between us for the first time. A flicker of something almost akin to surprise in his eyes. He quickly masked it with bravado. You think being tall means crap, he scoffed, attempting to reclaim dominance. I've killed bigger men than you overseas, and I'm supposed to be impressed. The veiled thread hung heavy, a testament to his violent past. Richard, Becky interjected, her voice now remarkably steady, finding a new well of strength. You got the DNA test results. You know it's not yours. Those tests can be faked, he retorted, a desperate, frantic denial. Then take another one, I countered, my voice echoing with unshakable authority. Through the court, but today, you leave. He cast a frantic glance around the room. 20 cell phones, like tiny, glinting weapons, were pointed directly at him, recording his every move. One of Becky's friends stood poised, a golf club held like a battle axe. And I, an immovable obstacle, still blocked his path to Becky. The fight was over, and he knew it. This isn't over, he said, backing slowly toward the door, his eyes blazing with defeated fury. Not even close, he pointed a finger at me, a lingering threat. I'll find out everything about you. Good luck with that, I replied, my voice cool, dismissive. He slammed the door with such force that a picture frame fell from the wall, shattering the lingering tension. Only then did everyone seem to collectively exhale a long, ragged breath of relief. Becky, her legs giving out from under her, collapsed into a nearby chair, her body trembling. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes, wet with tears, meeting mine. You don't know what you just did. Her mother, her face streaked with tears of pure, raw relief, simply stood there, sobbing silently. It was over, at least for now. With a sigh of immense relief, he had actually left, a rare and unsettling event, for Richard never just leaves. A palpable unease still hung in the air, a phantom chill, as we attempted to resurrect the party's festive spirit, but everyone's hands still trembled slightly, their eyes darting towards the door. Becky, her brow furrowed with a worrying that dulled her usual vivacity, half-heartedly unwrapped a few more gifts, her focus clearly elsewhere. Roughly 20 minutes later, feeling the need for a moment of fresh air and a quick errand, I walked Becky to my car, intending to retrieve something from the trunk. What we discovered, however, instantly shattered any lingering illusion of safety. There, stark against the asphalt, were all 4 of my tires, each sporting a neat, deliberate slash. Oh my God, Becky gasped, a hand flying to her mouth, her voice barely a whisper of horror. Then, as if summoned by our growing dread, her phone buzzed. A text message from Richard? My stomach plummeted as she showed me the accompanying photo, a close-up of my license plate. Below it, a chilling message. Ryan, Berkeley graduate. 3712 Pine Avenue, apartment 6C. See you soon, hero. My blood, already running cold, seemed to freeze solid in my veins. He had my address. My address. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my gaze transfixed on the glowing screen, rereading Richard's words over and over, each letter a cold, calculated stab. My full address, my apartment number, every detail he shouldn't possess. Becky was still beside me, her eyes wide with terror fixed on the ruined tires, and I could feel the tremor in her body, a frantic vibration against my arm. Ryan, I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice choked with guilt. This is all my fault. Before I could even formulate a response, the front door of the house burst open, and women from the baby shower started spilling out, their laughter replaced by hushed, worried murmurs. They instinctively converged in the driveway, forming a protective, almost defiant, circle around us. Blake, a force of nature even in crisis, pushed through the concerned cluster, her phone already pressed to her ear, her voice sharp with purpose. Yes, we need an officer at 4780 to Maple Street, she was saying. There's been property damage and threats. My eyes, however, remained glued to my tires, for clean, precise slashes in each one, a deliberate artistry of destruction. Richard had taken his time, a clear message that I was trapped, unable to drive anywhere. Around us, the women's voices rose in a cacophony of overlapping worries and shared outrage. A tense 15 minutes later, a patrol car finally pulled up. A young police officer emerged, perhaps in her mid-20s, her shoulders already slumped with a visible weariness that seemed to belie her youth. She methodically took photos of the vandalized tires, diligently jotting down the details of the incident, but even from her expression, I could discern a weary resignation. This wasn't going to lead anywhere, I thought with a sinking heart. So, he threatened you via text message and damaged your property, she recited, reviewing her notes, her voice flat. But you didn't actually see him slash the tires. Lauren, her voice bristling with indignation, interjected. Who else would it be? He literally just left after threatening everyone. The officer sighed, a heavy, almost practiced exhalation. Without proof it was him specifically, and without direct physical harm, there's not much we can do. The threats would need to be more specific. Saying see you soon isn't technically a threat of violence. A chorus of furious protests erupted simultaneously. Someone immediately brought up the horrifying Christmas incident. Another person grimly recounted the time Richard had broken someone's nose, but the officer merely continued to shake her head, a slow, unwavering dismissal. Has he actually hurt someone today? Right now, she pressed, her gaze unwavering. He has to hurt someone first. Blake's voice was sharp, cutting through the general chatter like a razor. That's what you're telling us. We have to wait for him to inflict physical harm. The officer's expression remained impassive. I'm sorry, that's how the law works. You can file for a restraining order. A bitter, almost defeated, laugh escaped Becky's lips. We tried that, she said quietly, her voice laced with the sting of past failures. His lawyer got the last one thrown out, said I was being vindictive because of the pregnancy. Justice, it seemed, was as elusive as smoke, constantly slipping through their grasp. The officer left shortly after, handing me a generic case number for insurance purposes, leaving us all standing in the driveway, a lingering tableau of helplessness. Nobody quite sure what to do next. Lauren was the first to break the heavy silence, her voice firm with resolve. We'll drive you to your apartment. You need to get your stuff. I began to protest. I can't ask you to, but Samantha kept me off, her tone leaving no room for argument. You're not asking. We're telling you. Come on. As I turned to go, Becky grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, her eyes wide with a desperate plea. You can't go back there. Not to stay. He knows where you live. Her mom, a silent pillar of strength, nodded emphatically. You're staying here tonight. We have a guest room. I wanted to argue, to declare that this wasn't my problem, that I had already done enough. But looking at Becky's face, seeing the raw, flickering fear in her eyes like a dying candle flame, I knew I had already crossed the line. There was no walking away from this now. A net of sisterhood had been cast, and I was inextricably caught. The drive to my apartment was quiet, a heavy silence thick with unspoken anxieties. Lauren gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, while Samantha, a human radar, incessantly checked the rearview mirrors, scanning for any sign of a tail. When we finally arrived, my building, ordinarily a beacon of familiarity, seemed to have taken on a predatory aura. Its familiar facade looked the same as always, yet everything felt fundamentally different, dangerous. Make it quick, Lauren urged, her voice low. In and out, my apartment was on the 6th floor, and we opted for the stairs. Samantha, ever pragmatic, had declared elevators traps, nowhere to run if Richard were to suddenly materialize. Inside, my hands, betraying my efforts to remain calm, trembled as I grabbed a duffel bag and began to haphazardly throw clothes in. Laptop, charger, some essential work files, each item a frantic gesture against the encroaching chaos. My own fear was a betrayal, a white flag I refused to wave, and it fueled the quiet, simmering anger within me. I wasn't supposed to be the one running scared. As we were leaving, my kindly, if somewhat nosy, neighbor, Mr. Chen, poked his head out of his doorway. Everything okay, Ryan, these ladies friends of yours? He asked, his voice filled with disarming normalcy. Yeah, everything's fine, I lied, my voice tight. But then, a surge of clarity. I reconsidered. Actually, if you see a guy with neck tattoos asking about me, call 911. The mask of composure on Mr. Chen's face fractured, worrying etching itself onto his features. Trouble, maybe. He murmured, his gaze serious. Just be careful. Back at Blake's house, the kitchen table, once a hub of joyful celebration, now transformed into a grim war council. Becky had her phone out, her trembling fingers scrolling through months of insidious messages from Richard. Each one, I discovered, was a fresh wound, more disturbing than the last. Look at this one, she said, her voice barely a whisper of disgust, showing me a text from just 3 weeks ago. It was a photo of her at a grocery store, a seemingly innocent snapshot, accompanied by a truly vile message. Nice melons you're buying, and then, another photo, this time of her at a doctor's appointment. The accompanying text sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. Hope the baby's healthy. Would be a shame if something happened. How many layers of malice could one man possess? Blake, her jaw set with grim determination, then pulled out a thick folder and dropped it onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud, a sound that echoed the weight of their despair, the sheer burden of 2 years of relentless torment. Police reports, she stated, her voice devoid of hope. 2 years worth. Nothing ever sticks. I began to flip through the pages, a sickening chronicle of harassment, stalking, property damage, repeated violations of restraining orders. Each report was stamped with a disheartening verdict. No further action or insufficient evidence. Symbols of official indifference. He knows exactly how far he can push, Blake explained, her voice heavy with the bitter wisdom of experience. He's a master of manipulation, never quite crossing the line into something they can actually prosecute. And he's smart about his alibis, like a cat playing with a mouse. By 9 o'clock, a profound melancholia settled over us as we began the grim task of dismantling the baby shower decorations. Pink streamers, once vibrant and festive, came down with a sigh. Balloons, full of joyous anticipation just hours ago, were popped, their air escaping with a series of deflating hisses. The baby girl banner, a promise of new life and happiness, was carefully folded away, packing away what should have been cherished memories. It felt profoundly wrong, a hollow ache where joy should have been. Blake was washing dishes, her movements deliberate and quiet, while I helped dry. You need to understand something, she said softly, her voice dropping to a near whisper, laden with a horror that was all too real. That fire he set, Becky barely made it out. She was sleeping, woke up to smoke. If her roommate hadn't come home early, she didn't need to finish. The unsaid words hung heavy in the air, a chilling testament to a terror narrowly averted. The investigator had said it. The atmosphere around us was electric, charged with an unspoken tension that hung beneath the surface. She pressed on, her voice firm, but the truth, the stark, undeniable truth, is that we know better. Richard, conveniently, was said to be at some local watering hole, surrounded by his usual coterie of friends, a loyal but dubious crew who, predictably, corroborated his every word, his flimsy alibi already neatly constructed. It seemed almost effortless for him. He always had someone, a willing pawn or a paid accomplice, readily available to spin a deceitful web on his behalf. To parenthood, have her falsehood served his immediate purpose. Just then, the jarring chime of my phone cut through the stifling atmosphere. A number I didn't recognize, a shadowy unknown on the caller ID, flashed ominously on the screen. My first instinct, a powerful urge, was to let it ring, to ignore the unwelcome intrusion. But Blake, ever pragmatic, offered a subtle, decisive nod. A silent directive urging me to confront whatever lay on the other end. A voice, disturbingly familiar, flowed through the receiver. Hello, Ryan. Buddy, Richard purred, his tone dripping with an unsettling, forced geniality, as if we were long-lost comrades, reminiscing about shared, forgotten histories, rather than bitter adversaries. Richard's honeyed words continued, a calculated performance. Listen, Ryan, I truly believe we just got off on the wrong foot, didn't we? So why don't we do the sensible thing? Let's meet up, just the two of us. No theatrics, no drama. We can talk this out, man to man, like civilized individuals. Iron out any perceived misunderstandings. His offer, seemingly reasonable, felt like a veiled threat. A trap disguised as an olive branch. My gaze flickered to Blake, who, with an almost prescient understanding of the unfolding manipulation, was already reaching for a pen and a crisp pad of paper ready to document every word, every subtle shift in Richard's deceitful narrative. Without a word, I activated the speakerphone, amplifying his insidious charm for both of us to scrutinize. I honestly don't think that's a very good idea, Richard, I responded, trying to keep my voice even, though a cold dread was beginning to coil in my gut. Come on, Ryan, don't be like that, he cajoled, attempting a familiar, buddy-buddy tone. You strike me as a reasonable, level-headed guy. This whole thing, it's just a colossal misunderstanding, a tempest in a teapot. Becky and I, we share a history, a deep connection, a past that binds us. You understand that, don't you? Sometimes, even the most devoted couples, they have their disagreements, their little squabbles. I cut him off, my voice sharp, injecting the harsh reality into his carefully constructed fantasy. You're not a couple, Richard, not anymore. You haven't been for 10 agonizing months. That chapter is unequivocally closed. The veneer of friendliness instantly shattered. His voice, once smooth, now grated, hardening with an unmistakable edge of malice. That's what she told you, isn't it? He sneered, the question loaded with contempt, and let me take an educated guess, Ryan. Did she also conveniently neglect to mention that the baby, this precious little life, isn't actually mine? My reply was simple, unyielding, a blunt instrument of truth. No, Richard. The DNA test, the irrefutable scientific evidence, is what told me that. Not her. A thick, suffocating silence descended, heavy and absolute, for a long, drawn-out moment. Then a chilling sound erupted from Richard's end, a laugh, a harsh, guttural burst of air, utterly devoid of joy or mirth, more akin to a predatory snarl than genuine amusement. Oh, those tests, he dismissed, his voice laced with feigned nonchalance. They can be wrong, you know? Labs, those fallible institutions, they make mistakes all the time, don't they? But hey, Ryan, this is all just noise. We can, and we will, sort all of this out, make everything right again. He paused, then continued. So, how about we grab some coffee tomorrow? Just a casual chat? I know you're quite fond of that little spot on 3rd Street, aren't you? The one with the artisanal blends, his casual mention of my preferred coffee shop, a seemingly innocent detail, landed like a cold, precise blow. A wave of nausea, sharp and sickening, surged through me, twisting my stomach into a knot. The implication was horrifyingly clear. He hadn't just guessed. He'd been observing me, tracking my daily routines for an unnervingly long time, enough to chronicle even my most mundane habits, like where I chose to buy my morning brew. It was a stark, chilling reminder of his relentless surveillance. My voice, though I tried to steady it, came out a little strained. I'm going to hang up now, Richard, I stated, not asking for permission, but declaring an end to the unsettling conversation. That's perfectly fine, Ryan, he chirped back, completely unperturbed, the menace in his tone growing more palpable. We'll talk soon. Very, very soon. The finality of his words was less an acceptance and more a chilling promise. With a soft click, the line went dead, severing the connection, but not the lingering dread. Across from me, Blake, her face a mask of quiet determination, had meticulously transcribed every salient detail, Richard's unknown number, the exact time of the call, every chilling word, every manipulative nuance. Barely 30 minutes later, the soft shuffle of footsteps announced Becky's descent. She appeared at the bottom of the stairs, a fragile silhouette in her worn pajamas, one hand instinctively cradling her noticeably swollen belly. Can't sleep, she murmured, her voice laced with exhaustion. The babies apparently decided to take up gymnastics in there tonight. A weary smile barely touched her lips. With an almost painful slowness, she eased herself onto the plush cushions of the couch, a testament to her physical discomfort. Her eyes, shadowed and heavy-lidded, spoke volumes of a profound weariness that transcended the immediate stress of the day. It was the cumulative fatigue of months, perhaps even years, spent battling this insidious nightmare. I'm so incredibly sorry, Ryan, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, that you've been unwillingly pulled into this absolute mess. She then immediately dismissed my impending reassurance, adding, no, don't say it's not my fault. A short, sharp sound escaped her, a laugh devoid of joy, acrid and bitter, a self-lacerating acknowledgement of her own perceived complicity. I chose him, she confessed, the words heavy with self-reproach. I made that terrible choice. And even worse, I stayed with him, even after that first horrifying time he raised his hand against me the moment the physical abuse began. Blake, ever protective, began to interject. Perhaps to offer comfort or correction, but Becky, driven by an urgent need to confess, to unburden herself of the crushing weight of her past, pressed on, her narrative unstoppable. He cried afterward, she recounted, her voice flat, devoid of emotion, a torrent of seemingly genuine tears. He dropped to his knees, a picture of abject remorse, pleading with me, begging for my forgiveness, swearing on everything holy that it was just the crushing stress from his military deployment, promising, insisting, he'd get professional help. And like a fool, a desperate, helpful fool, I believed him. Every single time her hand, almost unconsciously, went back to her belly, gently stroking the taut skin wearer, through the thin fabric of her pajamas, I could distinctly perceive the subtle, rhythmic movements of the baby within, a fragile life so utterly dependent on her strength. He was so incredibly charming at the beginning, she reminisced, a ghost of a wistful smile touching her lips, the epitome of the perfect gentleman. He'd show up with fresh flowers every single week, a thoughtful gesture that never failed to disarm me. He just seemed to instinctively know exactly what to say, what compliments to offer, what grand promises to make, painting a picture of an idyllic future. Blake, who had remained silent, now offered a quiet, almost mournful observation. That's precisely how they operate, Becky. The initial charm, the carefully crafted facade, it's all part of the insidious playbook. Becky, spurred on by Blake's knowing comment, continued her painful revelation. The control, it began subtly, almost imperceptibly, a slow, suffocating creep. First, it was just little things. He didn't like my friends, thought they were a bad influence, or found my clothes too revealing, suggestions that quickly morphed into demands. Then, he'd get visibly agitated, even furious, if I didn't respond to his texts within minutes, accusing me of ignoring him, of hiding something. By the time the chilling realization truly dawned on me, by the time I understood the suffocating web he had woven, I was already thoroughly ensnared, hopelessly trapped within his manipulative grasp. The next morning, I jolted awake on Blake's slightly too short couch, the dull ache in my back and the stiffness in my neck a minor inconvenience compared to the sudden, sharp sound of her voice on the phone. My physical discomfort, though present, was utterly inconsequential. Blake was pacing a frantic path across the living room, her movements sharp, agitated, and her voice, usually self-controlled, was now drawn taut with barely suppressed anger. No, she snapped into the receiver. You don't understand the gravity of this situation. He's not just bothering her, he's actively escalating his campaign. Yesterday's intimidation, that was merely the overture, the chilling prelude to something far more sinister. She then added, with a sigh of frustrated resignation, yes, I'll hold, just please. Try to expedite this. She covered the mouthpiece of the phone with a trembling hand and turned to me, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and fury. It's the lawyer, she hissed. Richard didn't waste any time. He spent the entire night sending out a deluge of emails to everyone imaginable, Becky's boss, her landlord, even her distant cousins, and somehow, he even managed to unearth her old high school friends on Facebook. Probably trawling through obscure connections, the content of these digital poison darts. He's systematically portraying her as mentally unstable, a deranged woman unfit to care for herself, let alone a child. Fabricating a narrative that she's cruelly and maliciously keeping his baby from him, twisting reality into a grotesque parody of the truth. Just then, Becky emerged from her bedroom, descending the stairs with a slow, laborious grace, one hand pressed firmly against the small of her aching back. He's trying to utterly destroy my life, she articulated, her voice hollow with despair, to systematically dismantle every support system, every refuge I have, until I'm left with absolutely nowhere to turn, no option but to crawl back to him, to surrender to his control. When Blake finally reconnected with the lawyer, the legal professional merely confirmed what we already instinctively understood. It's a clear case of character assassination, Blake relayed, her voice flat, repeating the lawyer's precise phrasing. A chillingly common tactic in these situations. His objective is to completely obliterate her credibility, to render her voice meaningless in the eyes of everyone long before he makes his next, more overt, calculated move. By the oppressive heat of noon, we found ourselves in the sterile, uninviting confines of the local police station, a place usually associated with safety, but now feeling like another bureaucratic hurdle. We were ushered into a small, windowless office where Detective Jerome duly awaited us. He was an older man, perhaps around 50, with a mop of salt and pepper hair and eyes that bore the unmistakable, weary wisdom of someone who had witnessed too much human cruelty. He had, unequivocally, seen this exact scenario play out countless times before. The signs were etched into every line of his face, every subtle gesture. Mr. Thompson, Miss Martinez, he began, his voice a low rumble, carefully perusing the tight statements we had just provided. I genuinely understand the immense frustration you're both experiencing. However, based on the information presented, Richard, as of right now, hasn't technically, in the strictest legal sense, broken any quantifiable laws. The words, though delivered with a measure of sympathy, were a blunt instrument of reality, but he slashed my tires. I interjected, the memory of the flat, deflated rubber still vivid, the injustice burning. Detective duly raised a hand, stopping me. Can you definitively prove it was him, Mr. Thompson? Do you have any direct witnesses who saw him in the act? Any surveillance video footage capturing the incident? He sent me a text message immediately afterward. I pressed, with my exact home address, a clear taunt. The detective sighed, a slow, weary exhalation. That's circumstantial, unfortunately. It could be interpreted as an unnerving coincidence, however unlikely it seems to you. Becky let out a short, choked laugh, a raw, bitter sound entirely devoid of humor. Coincidence, she echoed, her voice dripping with acid sarcasm. Right, of course. Detective Dooley leaned forward, his tired eyes meeting ours, a rare glimpse of personal empathy breaking through his professional demeanor. Look, I want to be very clear. I believe you both. I've been on this job for 20 long years, and I recognize his type, the pattern of behavior, as clearly as I recognize my own reflection. But the law, unfortunately, demands more than belief. It requires undeniable, irrefutable proof. Hard evidence, something tangible we can present in court. My advice, get security cameras installed immediately. Document absolutely everything, every text, every email, every suspicious vehicle, every single interaction, no matter how minor. So basically, Becky concluded, her voice hollow. The moment he truly crosses that line, the moment we can actually build a case, is when someone, usually the victim, has to get physically hurt first. Isn't that it? The detective's silence was answer enough. I know, he finally murmured, a genuine apology in his tone. Everyone keeps saying that. I'm truly sorry, but that's simply how the system, with all its inherent flaws and limitations, is structured to work. We departed the police station, the heavy metallic door clanging shut behind us, feeling not just disillusioned, but significantly worse, more vulnerable, and more utterly helpless than when we had first walked through its imposing entrance. Lauren, a beacon of steadfast support, was patiently waiting outside in her car, ready to chauffeur us to Becky's apartment. Becky desperately needed to collect more clothes, essential items, especially with the baby's imminent arrival looming so very close. However, as we approached Becky's building, a chilling sight stopped us dead in our tracks. Her apartment door, usually securely bolted, was now slightly ajar. A dark, unsettling gap inviting an ominous sense of foreboding. Becky instinctively reached for the handle, but Lauren, her voice sharp with sudden alarm, interjected, "Don't." She then, with a protective urgency, used her foot to slowly, cautiously push the door further open, her body language radiating a palpable sense of apprehension. At first glance, the apartment appeared eerily normal, almost unnervingly so. Nothing seemed overtly disturbed. The kitchen counters were spotless, the living room furniture neatly arranged, betraying no immediate signs of forced entry or struggle. But then, a sharp, choked gasp escaped Becky's lips, piercing the suffocating silence. Her eyes, wide with horror, were fixed on her bed. There, resting precisely on her pillow, was a tiny, delicate pink baby booty, unmistakably one of the matching pairs she had received just yesterday at her baby shower. "He was here," Becky whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile thread of sound woven with terror. "He still has a key. He was in my bedroom." He knew. My hand instinctively flew to my pocket, pulling out my phone, poised to dial the police. But the collective, crushing weight of realization settled upon us. We all knew, with a painful, sickening certainty, exactly what their response would be. No signs of forced entry. Nothing stolen. No visible damage to property. Just a baby booty innocently placed on a pillow. It would be dismissed. Just another coincidence. "He's not stealing anything," Becky explained, her voice trembling. As she slowly, deliberately backed away from the threshold of her own home, "He's showing me, in the most chilling way possible, that he can get to me, access my most private space, whenever he wants, with absolute impunity. It's a calculated act of psychological warfare, without a moment's hesitation." Blake pulled out her phone and immediately called a locksmith, her voice firm despite the underlying tension. We retreated to the sterile, impersonal hallway, standing vigil outside Becky's violated sanctuary. 3 agonizing hours and a steep $500 later, every single lock on her apartment door had been meticulously replaced, a tangible, if expensive, attempt to reclaim a semblance of security. The locksmith, an older, grizzled man named Frank, with hands calloused from years of securing homes, shook his head slowly, a grim expression on his face, as he worked diligently on the final lock. "Third job like this I've had this week alone," he muttered, his voice raspy. "Seems like there are a lot of women dealing with serious ex-partner problems lately, more than usual." Blake, ever curious, interjected, her eyebrows raised. Lately, Frank paused, then shrugged, his eyes holding a deep sadness. "Well, always, I guess. But it just seems worse now, doesn't it? Like these guys, they simply don't understand the meaning of no anymore. It's like the word has ceased to exist for them." On the 4th day after the horrifying discovery at Becky's apartment, I made a concerted effort to return to work, to re-enter the mundane rhythm of my professional life. I clung to the desperate hope that perhaps a dose of normalcy, a routine, a familiar environment would somehow provide a much-needed anchor, a temporary respite from the relentless, escalating chaos. But the moment I stepped into the brightly lit, ostensibly professional space of the office, I was met with a disconcerting sight. My coworkers, typically engaged in their morning rituals, were now looking at me not with their usual pleasantries, but with strange, almost pitying expressions, their gazes lingering a moment too long. Then, my boss, Janet, her name hanging unspoken, already seemed to be approaching, her face edged with a mixture of concern and something akin to apprehension, signaling that the normalcy I craved had already been utterly shattered. Janet called me into her office, her tone clipped, a stark contrast to her usual calm demeanor. "We had a visitor yesterday, Ryan," she began, the words hanging in the air, heavy with accusation. A cold knot formed in my gut, twisting tighter with each word she uttered, as my stomach sank with a sickening lurch. "He claimed to be the father of your girlfriend's baby," she continued, her brow furrowed with disbelief. "And then, incredibly, he accused you of kidnapping her. He presented himself as genuinely concerned, a man distraught by the alleged disappearance of his child's mother." "Janet, I can explain." I started to interject, a desperate plea forming on my lips. But Janet, ever the professional, cut me off with a raised hand, a gesture of finality. "Ryan," she stated, her voice unwavering, "I don't need the sordid details of your personal entanglements. However, what transpired yesterday, the scene this man created in our lobby, is wholly unacceptable. Security was forced to escort him out, a public spectacle that caused significant disruption." I mumbled an apology, a hollow echo in the tense silence. "I'm truly sorry, Janet. He's dangerous. He's my girlfriend's ex-partner." Her gaze softened, a hint of genuine concern mixed with professional exasperation. "Do you need some time off to sort this out?" she asked, the offer laced with an unspoken command. My initial impulse was to vehemently refuse, to cling to the structured routine of work as a much-needed escape, a powerful distraction from the chaos engulfing my life. But then I met her eyes sharp, discerning, and saw the undeniable truth. She wanted me gone, out of sight and out of mind, until this volatile situation had resolved itself. "Yeah," I conceded, my voice barely a whisper. "Maybe a few days would be helpful." Later that evening, the fragile peace I'd found was shattered by a frantic call from Becky, her voice raw with uncontrolled sobs. Through her choked cries, she revealed the latest act of psychological warfare. Someone, she wailed, claiming to be my husband, called all my doctors and canceled every single one of my appointments. Her desperation was palpable. "I'm 8 months pregnant, Ryan," she sobbed, the urgency underscored by her advanced state. "I need these appointments. The baby could come at any moment." It fell to Blake to spend grueling hours on the phone, navigating a labyrinth of medical offices, desperately searching for new doctors. She meticulously explained Becky's terrifying predicament, painting a vivid picture of the relentless harassment. While many receptionists and medical staff expressed genuine sympathy, a chilling undercurrent of fear permeated their responses. One particular receptionist, her voice hushed, confessed to having problems with violent exes before a grim acknowledgement of the real-world dangers. "We can see her," she finally offered, her tone a mix of caution and compassion. "But for her safety, she needs to use a different name when she comes in." It was a stark reminder of how deeply this man's influence had penetrated our lives, forcing us to adopt desperate measures. It was day 5. I sought refuge at my usual coffee shop, a sanctuary where I hoped to reclaim a sliver of normalcy for just an hour, to momentarily forget the encroaching darkness. But then a shadow fell across my table. Richard, his face alight with a disarmingly casual smile, as if we were old acquaintances, slid into the booth opposite me. "Ryan," he purred, his voice oozing false familiarity. "Good to finally talk." My hand instinctively tightened around the ceramic warmth of my coffee cup, the rim digging into my palm. But I forced my voice to remain steady, an anchor in the sudden tempest. "You need to leave," I stated, my eyes locked on his. "This is a public place, and it's a free country." Ignoring my dismissal, he calmly pulled out his phone, his thumb beginning to scroll through a chilling gallery of images. "You know," he drawled, his gaze never leaving the screen, "I researched you, Ryan, Berkeley graduate, good job at Morrison Tech." Clean record. The photos flashed before my eyes, candid shots of me at work, absorbed in my tasks. Me sweating it out at the gym, even a snapshot of me retrieving my mail just yesterday morning. It was a digital tapestry of my everyday life, meticulously captured. "Why," he continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "why throw it all away for some girl you don't even know?" He continued his disturbing slideshow, each image a fresh violation. "And this," he announced, pausing on a particularly unsettling image. "This is you at your parents' house last Christmas. Nice place, suburbs. White picket fence." The implication was stark, chillingly unambiguous. He knew about my family. He wasn't just observing me. He was targeting everything I held dear, painting a bullseye on their quiet suburban life. A desperate flicker of defiance ignited within me. "You're documenting your own stalking," I retorted, striving for a calmness I was far from feeling. "Thanks for the evidence." The taunt hit its mark. His predatory smile vanished, replaced by a sneer. "Evidence?" He scoffed, leaning forward, his voice a low growl. "You think the cops care? You think anybody cares about some nobody-playing hero?" He leaned in closer, his eyes burning with an unsettling intensity. "I did 4 tours in Afghanistan, Ryan. You know what I learned there? The system doesn't work. Rules don't matter. What matters is who's willing to go furthest." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle like a stone in my chest. "Is that a threat?" I managed, my voice strained. "It's information," he corrected, a chilling calm in his tone, as if he were imparting a profound truth. "Walk away now, Ryan. This isn't your fight. She's not your girl. That's not your baby. You're just some random guy who got pulled into something he doesn't understand." A cold rage began to simmer. "I understand enough," I countered, my jaw tight. He let out a derisive laugh, a harsh, humorless sound. "No, you don't," he sneered. "Becky and I, we have history. For years, you don't just walk away from that." She's confused right now. Hormonal from the pregnancy. She come back. They always do. Then, his gaze narrowed, piercing. A desperate attempt to sow doubt. The DNA test says tests can be wrong. Labs can be bought. You really think that baby isn't mine? I pushed myself up from the booth, a sudden surge of adrenaline fueling my movement. We're done here, I declared, my voice trembling slightly despite my resolve. Sit down, he commanded, his voice transforming, hardening into something cold and menacing. I'm not finished. Yes, you are, I shot back, turning my back on him, my heart thumping against my ribs. I walked out, every nerve prickling, acutely aware of his eyes burning into my back until I was out of sight. As I reached my car, my hands were shaking uncontrollably, the coffee cup clattering against the dashboard. I sat there for a minute, forcing myself to take deep, shaky breaths, trying desperately to calm the frantic pounding of my heart. Then, with a chilling certainty, I called my lawyer. He just made contact, I informed her, my voice still a little unsteady. He made direct threats about my family. Did you record it? She asked, her tone sharp, practical. No, I admitted, cursing myself. I didn't think to start recording everything. Every interaction. Be careful. Ryan, she warned, her voice grave. He's smart. He's done this before. Done this before, the words echoed, a chilling premonition. Fueled by a desperate need for answers, I dug through whatever public records I could access. The name of another ex-girlfriend surfaced, a ghost from 2 years prior. She had filed multiple police reports against Richard, a paper trail of harassment. But then, inexplicably, she had suddenly dropped all charges and vanished, relocating across the country to Oregon. What truly happened? Officially, the report stated she decided not to pursue charges, and officially, it was clear. She was utterly terrified, a victim silenced by fear, a disturbing pattern emerging from Richard's past. 3 days later, I accompanied Becky to her hastily arranged new doctor's appointment. The unsettling encounter with Richard at my usual coffee shop, coupled with his unnerving knowledge of my parents' home complete with a white picket fence detail gnawed at me. It wasn't just casual surveillance, this was an insidious, deeply disturbing level of tracking. This wasn't someone he supposedly just met at a baby shower. This was a man who had meticulously done his homework, compiling an elaborate dossier on everyone connected to Becky and, by extension, me, the waiting room, a space typically filled with the hopeful murmur of happy pregnant couples, felt like a pressure cooker. Becky's anxiety was palpable. Her hand instinctively gripped mine, her knuckles white, when a tall man strode through the door. It's okay, I whispered, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. It's not him, but I understood the raw terror that gripped her. For her, every creaking door, every approaching footstep, held the terrifying possibility of Richard's sudden, menacing presence. The doctor, a kind-faced woman, took Becky's blood pressure not once, not twice, but 3 times, her brow furrowed with concern. Your blood pressure is extremely high, she explained gently. You need to find ways to relax. This stress isn't good for you or the baby. Becky let out a short, bitter laugh, a sound devoid of humor. Relax, right? She scoffed, the irony heavy in her voice, a harsh indictment of our impossible situation. Is everything okay at home? The doctor probed, her tone laced with a gentle query. Becky and I exchanged a loaded glance, a silent acknowledgement of the impossibility of a simple answer. How, I wondered internally, how do you even begin to explain this escalating nightmare to someone? It's complicated, Becky finally managed, the understatement hanging heavily in the air, weighted with unspoken fear and frustration. That evening, on day 8 of this unfolding nightmare, a process server delivered another blow, knocking on Blake's door. Legal papers, he announced, handing over a thick envelope. Richard was suing for custody, baldly claiming Becky was an unfit mother. As Blake read through the documents, her face grew progressively redder, a furious flush spreading across her cheeks with each defamatory line. He's saying she's mentally unstable, she said, her voice rising in disbelief, that she's denying him access to his child, and that she's living with a stranger who's violent. I interjected, a cold wave washing over me. I've never. Blake cut me off, her anger boiling over. He's twisting everything, Ryan. He's claiming you assaulted him at the baby shower. With a frustrated cry, she flung the papers across the room, a blizzard of legal accusations scattering over the floor. He's using the system against us, she railed, her voice thick with despair, forcing us to fight him in court while he continues to stalk and terrorize us. On day 9, I returned to my apartment, needing to pack more essentials, trying to maintain some semblance of a normal routine amidst the escalating chaos. In the hallway, my elderly neighbor, Mr. Chen, stopped me, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a quiet, serious expression. That man came by yesterday, he murmured, his eyes wide with a hint of fear, the one with the neck tattoos. My blood ran cold. What did he want? I asked, my voice barely audible. Asked about you, Mr. Chen replied, his gaze flickering nervously. Said he was your girlfriend's brother. Worried about her, he leaned in conspiratorially. I didn't tell him anything, just your first name. But Ryan, be careful. The implication was clear. Richard was now actively seeking me out at my own home, weaving a fabricated story to deceive those around me, closing the net even tighter. Day 11, that was when everything truly escalated, the carefully contained chaos exploding outwards. Lauren called me, her voice a frantic, breathless whisper. Richard had shown up at her work. He made a scene in the lobby, she recounted, her voice cracking, yelling about how you were hiding his pregnant girlfriend. Security had to physically remove him. But her boss was absolutely furious. Barely an hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from Samantha. He'd been to her gym as well, spreading malicious lies, telling anyone who would listen that she was part of a conspiracy to keep him from his child. Richard wasn't just targeting Becky and me. He was methodically dismantling our support system, punishing anyone connected to us, casting a wide, venomous net of harassment, ensuring no one could escape his wrath. Oh, everyone from the baby shower, Becky murmured, her voice laced with a mixture of relief and lingering disbelief as the gravity of the situation began to settle. Every single person who stood by me, who helped me through all of this. That very evening, a heavy blanket of unease still clinging to us, we had all gathered at Blake's house. It was a familiar refuge, our usual sanctuary. There was me, of course, along with Becky, her growing belly a silent testament to the turmoil she endured. Blake, ever the steady anchor, and our friends, Lauren and Samantha, their presence a quiet, unwavering support. We were attempting, with a desperate, almost pathetic hope, to simply eat dinner, to pretend, even for a fleeting moment, that the world outside wasn't falling apart. The clink of forks against plates, the forced, hushed chatter, it was all a fragile facade, threatening to shatter at any second. And then, it did. A sudden, jarring crash ripped through the strained silence. The front window of the living room, a seemingly impenetrable barrier just seconds before, exploded inward, showering us with a glittering, deadly rain of shattered glass. Before we could even process the shock, another bone-rattling crash echoed, then another, each one closer, more violent. Heavy, jagged bricks, hurled with malicious force, began to fly like deadly projectiles through the now gaping openings where windows had once been. Get down, I bellowed, my voice raw with terror, instinct overriding everything else. I lunged, pulling Becky, her hands instinctively clutching her swollen belly, down to the hardwood floor with a sudden, desperate force. More crash, relentless and deafening, followed in rapid succession. The front windows, now utterly annihilated. The kitchen windows, too, obliterated in a cacophony of destruction. It was an absolute maelstrom of chaos, glass shards glinting wickedly under the dim ambient light, coating every surface. Huddled on the floor, Becky was sobbing, her hands pressed tightly over her abdomen, a primal instinct to protect the life within her, her body trembling uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Blake, ever the pragmatist even in the face of such terror, was already on the phone, her voice surprisingly steady, relaying the nightmare to 911. And then, just as abruptly as the terrifying onslaught had begun, it stopped. A chilling silence descended, broken only by our ragged breaths and Becky's soft whimpers. A moment later, the guttural whir of a truck engine shattered the stillness, growing louder before tires shrieked in protest against the asphalt as it sped furiously away, vanishing into the night. Is everyone okay? I stammered, my own voice trembling, the question barely escaping my lips as I carefully helped Becky to her feet, her legs still and steady beneath her. A quick scan revealed a small, shallow cut on her hand, a vivid crimson line against her pale skin, a souvenir from the shattered glass. Thankfully, it was superficial, nothing serious enough to warrant immediate concern beyond cleaning. But the physical toll was undeniable. We were all visibly shaking, adrenaline coursing through our veins, leaving us weak and disoriented. The living room, once a cozy haven, was now a scene of utter devastation. It looked like a war zone. What had been a warm, inviting space was now choked with an unthinkable amount of glittering, dangerous glass shards covering every inch of the floor, embedded in furniture, clinging to curtains. Alongside them lay scattered, broken bricks, brutal reminders of the assault. Then a glimmer of hope pierced through the horror. Our neighbor's security camera, a silent and blinking eye, had captured everything. The footage, clear as a crisp winter morning, showed Richard's truck, unmistakable in its distinctive markings. It showed him, his face contorted with rage, methodically hurling the heavy bricks. And then, it showed him coolly driving away, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Finally, Blake exhaled, her voice a mix of exhaustion and vindication, as the flashing lights of police cruisers painted the shattered facade of her house. Finally, we have real, undeniable evidence. Detective Dooley, a man whose weary eyes had seen too much, arrived personally, surveying the ruin with a grim, practiced gaze. We'll arrest him first thing in the morning, he stated, his voice firm, leaving no room for doubt. This isn't just a minor incident. This is felony vandalism. And given the nature of the projectiles and the intent, it's also assault with a deadly weapon. He was right. Richard had absolutely crossed a line that night. Yet, even as the words offered a temporary solace, a cold certainty settled in our stomachs. We all knew, with a sickening dread, that Richard would make bail. We knew, with absolute conviction, that this was far, far from over. That night, sleep was an elusive, cruel stranger. Our minds raced, replaying the horror, our bodies thrumming with residual fear. Blake, seemingly incapable of stillness, swept endless piles of shattered glass until well past 3 o'clock in the morning, the rhythmic scrape of the broom a desperate attempt to restore order to chaos. Even as we repeatedly urged her to rest, to let it wait. It was her way of processing, a tangible task to distract from the intangible terror. Becky, acutely sensitive and still deeply traumatized, retreated to the guest room. She meticulously stuffed towels under the door, a futile barrier against the lingering, acrid scent of pulverized glass and shattered plaster that permeated the air, a smell, she confessed, that made her profoundly nauseous, triggering her morning sickness with renewed intensity. As for me, I remained rooted on the couch, every fiber of my being taut with annoying anxiety. I listened, my ears straining, to the distant hum of every passing car, my imagination running wild, painting chilling scenarios. Was that his trek? Would he really be brazen enough to come back, to finish the brutal act he'd started, to unleash even more havoc upon us? The thought sent shivers down my spine. Detective Dooley's call came precisely at 10 o'clock the next morning, cutting through the strained quiet of our household. The news, though expected, still brought a surge of mixed emotions. They had apprehended Richard at his workplace, making quite a public spectacle of the arrest. Later, through a whispered account from a sympathetic colleague of Richard's, we learned the full extent of his theatrics. He had deliberately ensured that every eye in the office witnessed his public humiliation, seizing the opportunity to perform. He raged, his voice booming with feigned indignation, about false accusations and corrupt cops, clearly attempting to manipulate the narrative and garner sympathy. His bail, to our collective dismay, was shockingly low, a mere $5,000. Predictably, his mother, always his enabler, swiftly paid it. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a paltry 3 hours after his arrest, he was back on the street. That's all the justice we get for now, I muttered bitterly, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. And as if to underline his contempt for any consequences, by 4 p.m., his distinct truck idled past Blake's house. It moved at an agonizingly slow crawl, its windows deliberately rolled all the way down, the speakers blaring a defiant, taunting tune. We all knew the restraining order stipulated he couldn't come within 500 feet of the property. But Richard, in a display of chilling, calculated malice, had clearly measured. The street, we realized with a sickening certainty, was precisely 501 feet from the front door. He wasn't breaking the law, not technically, but he was sending a clear, terrifying message, I'm still here, I'm watching. The next week dragged by, each day an agonizing crawl under the suffocating weight of Richard's psychological warfare. He meticulously tested every single boundary, a predator circling its prey. We'd see his truck, always parked just an inch beyond the restraining order's legal limit, a silent, menacing sentinel. He'd materialize at the grocery store, the cafe, or the park just moments after we'd left, leaving behind a lingering sense of his presence, a chilling reminder that he was always near. Always watching, his actions were always technically legal, always chillingly calculated, designed to inflict maximum emotional distress without crossing the letter of the law. On day 19, the cold, sterile reality of the courtroom loomed. We had to face him for the custody hearing, a terrifying prospect that churned Becky's already delicate stomach. She threw up twice that morning, violent spasms of nerves racking her body. Her belly, now undeniably huge, a beautiful, vulnerable curve, made it difficult for her to even fit comfortably behind the defendant's table, a stark visual contrast to Richard's carefully crafted facade. Richard, the master of manipulation, arrived in a pristine suit and tie, his hair immaculately cut short, every detail meticulously curated to project an image of a respectable, undeniably concerned father. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and the sight of him made my blood run cold. His lawyer, an older woman with an unnervingly sharp gaze, was clearly a seasoned veteran, specializing in aggressive father's rights cases. She proceeded to weave a narrative, a tapestry of insidious lies and twisted truths that made my stomach churn with a sickening blend of anger and despair. My client, she declared, her voice dripping with indignation, has been systematically and cruelly denied access to his own child. Her gaze then sharpened, fixing on me with an almost palpable disdain. Miss Martinez, she continued, her words of venomous sting, has enlisted a complete stranger, a man she barely knows, to effectively play father in a transparent attempt to keep my client, the biological father, away from his baby. The judge, a man in his 60s with an air of profound weariness etched onto his face, turned his gaze to me. How long have you known Ms. Martinez? He inquired, his tone neutral, yet probing. We knew each other in college, Your Honor, I responded, my voice, I hoped, steady. We reconnected recently, Richard's lawyer, like a coiled viper, pounced instantly. Recently, she scoffed, her voice dripping with theatrical disbelief. Meaning, perhaps, a mere 2 weeks ago. This man, she spat, gesturing dismissively in my direction, has known my client's pregnant ex-girlfriend for barely 2 weeks and is already living with her. I started to interject. I'm not living with, but she cut me off, her voice rising in a crescendo of indignation. He's been staying at her mother's house, playing house with a pregnant woman, deliberately confusing my client's unborn child about its true paternal figure, the judge. After a moment of deliberation, delivered his ruling, a paternity test would be ordered after the baby's birth, and if Richard was indeed the biological father, he would be granted supervised visitation. It was a partial victory for Richard, a chilling confirmation of our worst fears. The moment the ruling was announced, Becky bolted from the courtroom, rushing blindly towards the nearest bathroom. A moment later, I heard the unmistakable, wrenching sound of her throwing up again. Blake followed, a pillar of quiet strength, gently rubbing Becky's back as she hunched over, great, shuddering sobs rocking her body. He's going to get access to my baby, she choked out between gasps, the words laced with raw despair. After everything he's done, they're still going to give him access. The injustice was a palpable, crushing weight. Just 2 days later, Detective Dooley called with a sober, practical suggestion. I should consider staying somewhere else. Your presence, he explained, his voice gentle but firm, seems to escalate things. Richard views you as the primary obstacle. If you're not there, perhaps he'll back off, at least for a while. It was a bitter pill to swallow. A crushing admission that my efforts to protect Becky were inadvertently making her a greater target. So, with a heavy heart, I packed a bag and moved into a cheap motel off Highway 9. It was a utilitarian, $40 a night kind of place, permeated with the stale, lingering scent of old cigarettes. But it served its purpose. It was a safe, anonymous distance from Blake's house. A small sacrifice for what we hoped would be Becky's peace of mind. Despite the physical distance, Becky's anxiety remained a constant, palpable force. She texted me constantly, a steady stream of fear and vulnerability. Every unexplained sound made her jump, her nerves frayed to their absolute limit. Every passing car became a potential threat, its headlights casting menacing shadows, its engine noise a chilling reminder. It could be him. On day 22, Richard opened a new, insidious front in his campaign of terror, the online world. He launched a relentless social media assault, inundating Facebook with a barrage of posts meticulously crafted to portray himself as the wronged party, the heartbroken father unjustly kept from his child. He unearthed old photographs, carefully selected from a time when he and Becky had once shared a semblance of happiness. Becky's radiant smile captured against the backdrop of a sun-drenched beach, her arms wrapped around him. "This was us," he wrote, the caption dripping with manipulative victimhood, before she lost her mind. "Now she won't even let me feel my own baby kick." The audacity, the cruel twisting of their past, was breathtaking. The post quickly attracted a swarm of angry strangers, a faceless online mob, who eagerly piled on, unleashing a torrent of vitriolic comments about Becky. They branded her selfish, cruel, and disgustingly accused her of using the baby as a weapon, echoing Richard's warped narrative with frightening zeal. Lauren and Samantha, ever vigilant, diligently reported every single egregious post, helping to stem the tide of online hate. Yet, to our utter disbelief and crushing frustration, Facebook's automated response consistently declared that Richard's venomous campaign did not violate community standards, leaving Becky exposed and vulnerable to his relentless digital assault. Day 25, the digital clock on my cheap motel nightstand glared 3 a.m. when my phone shrieked, slicing through the oppressive quiet. It was Blake, her voice taut, strained almost to breaking point with barely suppressed panic. "She's in labor," she gasped, the words tumbling out in a rush. "We're heading to Memorial Hospital." Now, adrenaline surging, I practically threw on whatever clothes I could grab, abandoning all semblance of caution as I drove probably twice the legal speed limit. My hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I found them quickly in the hushed, sterile bustle of the maternity ward. Becky was there, her face pale and drawn, clutching Blake's hand with white-knuckled intensity through each agonizing wave of contractions. She looked so incredibly young, so terribly vulnerable, and utterly terrified. "You came," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile thread of surprise and relief woven between her ragged breaths. Her eyes, wide and glistening with pain, met mine. "Of course, I came," I murmured, squeezing her hand, a promise of unwavering presence in the face of her ordeal. How could I not be there? Barely an hour later, the fragile peace of the maternity ward was shattered by the unmistakable, aggressive presence of Richard. We heard him before we saw him, his voice echoing menacingly down the hallway, brazenly demanding to be allowed into the delivery room. "That's my child being born," he bellowed, his voice filled with a self-righteous fury. "I have rights." Security guards, thankfully, managed to keep him confined to the waiting room, but his strident, enraged voice carried, cutting through the thin hospital walls, a constant, grating intrusion. Becky's blood pressure, already precarious, spiked dangerously high, sending worried glances between the nurses. In a desperate attempt to shield her from his toxic presence, they swiftly moved us to a room further down the corridor, away from the waiting area. Yet even there, his muffled shouts about father's rights and discrimination occasionally pierced the quiet, a relentless psychological assault. At precisely 9:23 a.m., amidst a profound sense of relief and overwhelming joy, Cassandra, a tiny beacon of new life, finally arrived. Yet, even this sacred moment was tainted by Richard's performative outrage. From the waiting room, he was live-streaming the entire ordeal, painting himself as the tragic victim for his online audience. "They're keeping me from my daughter's birth," he wailed into his phone, his voice laced with theatrical despair. This is the systemic discrimination fathers have to deal with in America. His desperation for attention, for control, reached a new fever pitch. When a team of security guards finally attempted to physically bar him from entering the maternity ward altogether, he violently shoved past them, fueled by a terrifying, unhinged determination. He somehow managed to barge his way all the way to the nursery window, his face pressed against the glass, before 3 additional, larger guards finally descended upon him. Their movements swift and decisive, putting an end to his terrifying display. The immediate aftermath was a blur of frantic activity, a desperate scramble to extract him from the chaotic scene. Becky, her body still trembling from the ordeal, clutched Cassandra to her chest with a fierce, almost primal grip. Her face, usually radiant, was now a mask of anguish, tears carving hot, uneven paths through the smudges of exhaustion. These weren't the tears of overwhelming happiness, the joyous release of a new mother finally holding her child. No, these were born of a cold, creeping dread, a chilling premonition of the battle that lay ahead. The raw, guttural cries of her newborn daughter were a stark counterpoint to the silent scream trapped in Becky's own throat. Barely 24 hours after Cassandra's fragile entrance into the world, the ink on her birth certificate still metaphorically wet, the ominous legal machinery began to grind. Richard, with chilling efficiency, filed emergency custody papers, plunging Becky and everyone around her into an immediate, disorienting legal quagmire. His lawyer, a sharp-suited automaton of the law, painted a picture of a wronged, loving father cruelly denied the fundamental right to bond with his child. The argument was simple, yet insidious. Withholding access, even under these harrowing circumstances, constituted a form of abuse, a deprivation of paternal rights that demanded swift judicial intervention. Could anything be more grotesquely manipulative, twisting a mother's legitimate fear into a weapon against her? This particular judge, a figure of stern impartiality and, crucially, a different temperament from the one who might have previously overseen Richard's machinations, acted with decisive speed. There was no hesitation, no drawn-out deliberation. A paternity test was ordered immediately, an urgent mandate that underscored the gravity of the situation, yet also offered a sliver of hope that science could cut through the psychological warfare. Within moments, the clinical reality set in. They drew blood from Cassandra, a tiny, unsuspecting being, barely 30 hours old and still navigating the bewildering transition to extracorporeal life. Becky watched, helpless, as a nurse delicately but firmly pricked her daughter's impossibly small heel. Each minuscule drop of blood, collected for the definitive DNA analysis, felt like a dagger piercing Becky's own heart. Her sobs, raw and guttural, filled the sterile hospital room, a stark testament to the profound violation she felt on her child's behalf. It was an unwelcome intrusion into the most sacred of bonds, a scientific interrogation forced upon an innocent. The agonizing week-long wait for the results stretched into an eternity, each passing hour laden with a crushing uncertainty. Then, on day 28, a date etched forever in our collective memory, we finally prepared to leave the cold, clinical confines of the hospital. But even this small victory was immediately overshadowed. There, in the bustling public parking lot, a sentinel of dread, sat Richard in his pickup truck. His presence was perfectly legal, utterly within his rights in a public space, yet it felt like a deliberate act of psychological intimidation. As we slowly drove past, the exhaust fumes mingling with our anxiety, he offered a casual wave, his lips curving into that same unnervingly calm, almost predatory smile we remembered from the coffee shop, a chilling tableau of control, a silent declaration that he was still very much a part of their lives, whether invited or not. Blake's once quiet house had undergone a profound, almost seismic transformation. Every corner now hummed with the delicate, yet demanding, rhythm of a newborn. Cassandra's tiny, insistent cries punctuated the stillness of the night, a constant reminder of her fragile presence. The air itself was thick with the sweet, slightly metallic scent of formula, mingling with the faint, comforting aroma of baby powder. Miniature clothes, impossibly small and colorful, seemed to spill from every surface draped over chairs, peeking from laundry baskets, a testament to the joyous chaos that was supposed to define new life. Yet, beneath the veneer of domestic bliss, a palpable tension lingered, a shadow cast by Richard's persistent threat. Recognizing the immense pressure Becky was under, both as a new mother and as a target of relentless harassment, I made it my daily mission to be there. Every morning, I arrived with fresh groceries, a small but tangible act of support, ready to shoulder any burden they needed. I'd cradle Cassandra, her tiny body warm and trusting in my arms, while Becky seized a precious few minutes for a shower, a brief respite from the incessant demands. Whether it was folding laundry, preparing meals, or simply offering a listening ear, I was their steadfast anchor in a rapidly swirling storm. On day 35, a date indelibly marked by a fleeting moment of hope, the first paternity test results finally arrived. The envelope, when opened, revealed the unequivocal truth: Richard wasn't the father. A wave of profound relief, a lightness we hadn't felt in weeks, washed over us. We exchanged hopeful glances, daring to believe, even for a moment, that the nightmare was finally, mercifully over. How utterly, tragically naive we were. It was an illusion, a fragile bubble of optimism destined to burst with brutal force. Before the ink could even dry on the first set of results, Richard's legal team, a relentless machine of manipulation, sprang into action. That very same day, his lawyer filed a blistering motion, immediately challenging the integrity of the test. The claim was audacious, bordering on absurd. The results, they argued, were tampered with. The sacred chain of custody, the meticulously documented journey of the sample had been fatally compromised. With chilling confidence, they demanded an entirely independent test, not just anywhere, but at a laboratory of Richard's choosing. It was a blatant power play, a strategic maneuver designed to prolong the agony and seize control of the narrative. The judge, visibly worn thin by the escalating legal theatrics and the sheer obstinacy of the case, reluctantly conceded. "How is this even legal?" Becky whispered, her voice laced with a raw, disbelieving frustration, turning to her lawyer, her eyes pleading for an explanation. "The test proved he's not the father. Isn't that enough?" Her lawyer, a picture of weary resignation, explained the grim reality of the justice system. "He has a right to challenge the results," she stated, her tone heavy with the weight of experience. The court, for all its supposed impartiality, tends to err on the side of potential fathers. Even when those fathers present clear dangers, or perhaps especially then, they tread carefully. They fear accusations of bias. You see, a public relations nightmare they'd rather avoid. It was a disheartening revelation, exposing the chinks in the armor of justice. The subtle ways a system designed to protect could be twisted to persecute. Richard, a predator with a chillingly precise understanding of legal boundaries, knew exactly how to weaponize the system against them. His harassment was a meticulously choreographed dance on the edge of legality. He'd cruise past Blake's house not 5 times, not 7, but precisely 6 times a day, just enough to be a constant, unsettling presence, a shadow lurking at the periphery, yet just under the legal threshold for stalking. Then, with an almost supernatural sense of timing, he'd materialize at the grocery store mere minutes after Becky had departed, a phantom presence leaving a lingering scent of fear. Each encounter, he'd insist with an infuriating calm, was merely coincidental, perfectly legal, yet each felt like a carefully aimed dart, slowly poisoning their sense of security. It was psychological warfare, waged with infuriating impunity. On day 38, the escalating tension breached a new, more personal boundary. Richard, flanked by 2 hulking men whose very presence radiated menace, materialized at my workplace. They positioned themselves, not quite blocking the exits, but close enough to make escape feel like a dangerous proposition. "Just want to talk," Richard announced, his hands raised in a faint gesture of reasonableness, a wolf in sheep's clothing. My colleagues, their faces a mixture of alarm and morbid curiosity, peered through the glass walls of the conference room, frozen witnesses to the unfolding drama. My heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, but I forced a calm facade. Under the pretense of engaging him, I discreetly texted Becky to call 911, hoping to buy precious minutes. "The weather, looks like rain later, doesn't it?" I chattered, desperately grasping for any mundane topic to keep him engaged. Then, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, he struck. "You know she's using you, right?" He sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. "Soon as this blows over, she'd drop you. You're just a prop." As he spoke, his two enforcers steadily shifted, inching closer. They didn't touch me, not overtly, but their proximity was palpable, oppressive. I could smell the stale cigarettes clinging to their clothes, a noxious aroma of implied violence. It makes me wonder, even now, if Detective Dooley's earlier suggestion for Ryan to leave actually helped, or perhaps inadvertently made things worse. Did Richard feel emboldened, freer to act without the perceived threat of Ryan's presence to protect Becky? Was my own vulnerability, in a way, a consequence of that advice? The blare of approaching sirens, a welcome but almost too late symphony, sliced through the tension just as one of Richard's associates, a grim smile playing on his lips, placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. The police arrived, separating us, their presence a momentary shield. Yet, frustratingly, they all dispersed without charges. Just another misunderstanding, Richard's lawyer would undoubtedly spin it. My boss, her face a rigid mask of professional disapproval, summoned me to her office immediately afterward. "This has to stop," she stated, her voice devoid of sympathy. "I'm genuinely sorry about your personal situation, but we simply cannot tolerate this kind of disturbance at the workplace. You either take a leave of absence indefinitely, or you'll have to find another job." It was an ultimatum. A stark reminder that the tentacles of Richard's malice were now reaching into every corner of my life, forcing me to choose between my livelihood and my safety. The next day, day 39, the results of the second paternity test, the one Richard himself had demanded, arrived. The outcome was precisely the same. Richard was unequivocally not Cassandra's father. His lawyer, with a desperate, almost pathetic tenacity, attempted to resurrect the tired chain of custody argument, but the judge, whose patience had clearly been stretched to its absolute breaking point, had finally reached her limit. "Mr. Thompson," she declared, her voice resonating with an unshakable finality, "you have now undergone 2 entirely independent tests. Both, I repeat, both confirm that you are not the biological father of this child. Any further motions on this matter will result in immediate contempt charges." The words hung in the air, a hammer blow to Richard's carefully constructed delusion. He sprang to his feet with such explosive force that his chair clattered loudly to the floor behind him, a sound that echoed the shattering of his control. His lawyer, ever the pragmatist, quickly seized his arm, murdering hurried, cautionary words. But Richard was beyond reason. He stormed out of the courtroom, slamming the heavy door with such violent force that the entire building seemed to shudder, the reverberations of physical manifestation of his unbridled rage. That very night, Richard's fury manifested in a vile act of vandalism. Blake's house, their supposed sanctuary, was desecrated. Obscene, venomous words, dripping with misogyny and hate, were spray-painted across the pristine walls, a public shaming designed to terrorize Becky and anyone associated with her. Adding an even more sinister layer to the attack, the security cameras, those silent sentinels of protection, had mysteriously and conveniently ceased functioning a full hour before the defilement began. Inside, Cassandra, a tiny, sensitive barometer of the household's turmoil, cried inconsolably throughout the night, her infant cries reflecting the raw, palpable stress that permeated every corner of the home. The once-bright dwelling was now cloaked in a tangible pall of fear and despair. "He's punishing everyone who helped me," Becky whispered the next morning, her voice barely a thread, laced with a profound and crushing guilt. Her shoulders slumped, burdened by the weight of this collateral damage. This is my fault. All of this, it's because of me, her eyes. Once bright, now held the haunted look of someone who felt personally responsible for the suffering of others. A cruel manipulation that only intensified her despair. I looked at her, my heart aching, but my resolve firm. You can't negotiate with someone like him, Becky, I stated, my voice unwavering. Though it pained me to deliver such a harsh truth, it'll never be enough. Giving him an inch will only embolden him to take a mile, and then another, until there's nothing left for you to give. His hunger for control is insatiable. On day 40, Detective Dooley, his expression grim, paid us another visit. His words were stark, devoid of any comforting platitudes. Richard's escalating, he warned, his eyes holding a profound seriousness. Men like him, when they're truly cornered, when their illusion of control shatters, they often do something extreme. You should seriously consider leaving town, getting out of his reach. Becky's shoulders slumped. I can't afford to leave, she countered, the raw despair evident in her voice. I just had a baby, detective. I have no money, no job, nothing. Dooley wasn't swayed. Then hotels, he instructed, his voice firm, move around. Don't stay in one place for more than a night or two. Make yourselves harder targets. That same evening, the phone rang, and it was Richard's mother, her voice a ragged, terrified sob. Blake, recognizing the urgency, put her on speakerphone. He's drinking, she wailed, her words slurred with fear. He keeps saying if he can't have his family, no one can. I'm so scared what he'll do. The chilling implication hung heavy in the air. The threat wasn't just to Becky and Cassandra anymore. It was a blanket declaration of destruction. There was no discussion, no hesitation. We packed that night with frantic, desperate energy, stuffing essentials into bags, our minds racing with fear. We found a small, nondescript hotel about 20 miles away, a place that mercifully took cash and asked no intrusive questions, offering a temporary, fragile reprieve from the encroaching darkness. On day 43, the illusion of safety we'd found in the anonymous hotel was shattered by a phone call from Lauren, her voice trembling with dread. The news was chilling. Richard, with a cunning that bordered on genius, had managed to procure the entire guest list from Becky's baby shower venue. He had sweet-talked the staff, claiming he was planning a surprise party for Becky, twisting a joyful occasion into a weapon. Now, everyone who had offered their love and support that day was being targeted. Their phones rang with unnerving frequency, unknown numbers flashing on their screens. Strange, unfamiliar cars idled ominously on their streets. Samantha, a close friend, discovered her gym bag had been brazenly stolen from her locked car. A clear message. The kind woman who had helped Becky with the golf club, another innocent bystander, woke to find her tires viciously slashed. These weren't random acts. They were precise, calculated strikes, designed to dismantle Becky's support network piece by agonizing piece. He's punishing everyone who helped me, Becky whispered, her voice barely a thread, laced with a profound and crushing guilt. Her shoulders slumped, burdened by the weight of this collateral damage. This is my fault. All of this, it's because of me, her eyes. Once bright, now held the haunted look of someone who felt personally responsible for the suffering of others. A cruel manipulation that only intensified her despair. Day 50, 2 o'clock in the morning. The piercing shriek of the hotel fire alarm ripped through the oppressive silence, dragging us from a fitful sleep. A cacophony of panicked shouts and frantic footsteps erupted, as guests, still half asleep and disoriented, stumbled blindly into the cold night air, clad in pajamas. Their faces etched with confusion, the parking lot became a swirling vortex of crying children, barking dogs, and general pandemonium. And then, as if materializing from the very chaos itself, Richard appeared. He was suddenly there, standing chillingly close to Becky, a malevolent specter in the pre-dawn gloom. Cute baby, he murmured, his voice a low, insidious whisper, as his hand, with an almost imperceptible movement, reached out and briefly touched Cassandra's head. Then, as quickly and silently as he had arrived, he was gone, swallowed by the swirling crowds, leaving behind only a lingering scent of dread. Hotel security, when questioned, swore they had no record of his entry, no surveillance cameras capturing his phantom presence. But we absolutely knew he had been there. It wasn't about the fire alarm, it was a deliberate, terrifying demonstration. He was showing us, with chilling clarity, that there was no sanctuary, no hidden place he couldn't penetrate, no corner of their lives he couldn't reach. That morning, fueled by a potent cocktail of fear, fury, and a desperate resolve, I made a decision that felt both inevitable and terrifying. I called Richard directly. The phone rang only once before his voice, smug and dripping with malicious satisfaction, answered. Finally ready to talk man to man, are we? He purred as if he'd been waiting for this moment, orchestrating it all along. Meet me at Riverside Park, 2 o'clock this afternoon, just you and me. Rowing some balls, hero, just make sure you come alone. I didn't tell Becky. The very thought of it was impossible. Her justifiable fear would have driven her to try and stop me, to plead with me not to walk into such an obvious trap. But something, anything, had to change. We simply couldn't endure this suffocating existence forever, constantly looking over our shoulders, living in a perpetual state of terror. This was a gamble, a desperate roll of the dice, but the alternative was a slow, agonizing descent into madness. At precisely 2 o'clock, the sun high overhead, I sat alone at a weathered picnic table, deliberately choosing one right in the middle of Riverside Park. amidst a comforting backdrop of children playing and dog walkers strolling. A public place, I reasoned, bristling with witnesses, would afford me some measure of safety, a flimsy shield against his malice. Yet, as if to immediately underscore his contempt for any pretensive honor, Richard arrived not alone, but flanked by his two burly companions, those same silent enforcers from my workplace. Insurance, he grunted, a cynical smirk twisting his lips as he settled onto the bench directly opposite me, his henchmen fanning out discreetly but unmistakably nearby. The negotiation, if it could even be called that, began without preamble. Now, here's the deal, he began, his voice low and menacing. You disappear. You stop playing daddy to a child that isn't yours, to a woman who will never truly be yours. Do that, and I'll leave Becky alone for a while until she finally realizes she needs me. Because women always come back when he left the sentence and finished, hanging in the air like a venomous promise, his words dripping with a perverse confidence. A chilling insight into his deeply twisted perception of human relationships and control. Have babies, they desperately need that help, that unconditional support. And if I don't step in, if I look away, then I know, deep down, that things will only spiral into something far worse for them. Your parents, I continued, pressing, they live in Modesto, don't they? A rather nice, sprawling house, if I recall correctly. And your sister, the one who teaches 3rd grade, right? She's got all those adorable, bright-eyed kids in her class, doesn't she? The implication hung heavy in the air, a chilling reminder of how easily his reach could extend beyond us. At that moment, a calculated risk, I pulled my phone from my pocket, deliberately turning the screen towards him, illuminating the recording icon blinking steadily. You see this, Richard, I stated, my voice steady despite the tremor in my gut. You just explicitly threatened my family on tape. Every word, every veiled menace. His friends, who had been lingering nearby, shifted, their eyes darting to the phone. One of them lunged, a desperate, clumsy grab, but I instinctively recoiled, backing away a step, then another. The sudden agitation, the raised voices, started to draw curious glances from other park visitors, a dog walker pausing mid-stride, a young couple on a bench turning their heads. Richard's face, already flushed with anger, now deepened to a furious crimson. You think you're so clever, don't you? He spat, his voice low and guttural. That recording, it means absolutely nothing. I've got connections, I know judges, I know lawyers, people who can make a recording like that vanish into thin air. I know precisely how to manipulate the system to twist it to my advantage. He might have believed his own bluster, might even have a modicum of truth to it, but I knew better. Added to the accumulating weight of his previous actions, his relentless pursuit, his escalating threats, that short, damning audio clip was more than enough. It was the linchpin, perhaps, for felony stalking charges. That very evening, the urgency still a cold knot in my stomach. I handed the digital evidence to Detective Dooley. He took the phone, his expression unreadable, and listened intently to the recording. Not just once, but twice, his brow furrowed in concentration as he meticulously jotted down notes in a small pad. He looked up, his gaze meeting mine. Combined with everything else we'd gathered, he confirmed, a grim certainty in his tone, this audio clip. Yes, this just might be enough for felony stalking charges. We'll move to arrest him tomorrow morning. I hadn't dared to tell Becky yet. The thought of offering her even a sliver of false hope, only for something to inevitably go wrong, was a risk I couldn't bear to take. Her fragile peace, even this temporary one, was too precious. That night, a different hotel, one slightly closer to the bustling heart of town, offered us a temporary refuge. Becky and Cassandra, curled together in a single bed, found a fitful sleep while I, ever vigilant, stretched out on the floor by the door, a makeshift sentinel. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, a faint, almost imperceptible sound snagged my attention, a subtle rustling at the adjoining room door, the one connecting our sanctuary to the unknown space next door. My breath hitched, a distinct click echoed in the stillness, followed by the soft creak of a hinge. The door, slowly, menacingly, swung inward. Richard stepped into the dim light of our room, his silhouette chillingly defined. In his hand, glinting dully, was that knife, the very one from the baby shower, the same innocent utensil Becky had used just days prior to slice celebratory cake, now transformed into an instrument of terror. Becky's scream tore through the silence, raw and desperate, as she instinctively snatched Cassandra, pulling her impossibly close. Richard, a predator in human form, surged forward, his eyes locked on them. Adrenaline surged through me. Without a second thought, I launched myself from the floor, tackling him hard from the side. We crashed into the flimsy TV stand with a sickening crunch of plastic and with the impact jarring my bones. The knife, momentarily dislodged, went skittering across the carpet. He was undeniably strong, his movements betraying a dangerous, trained efficiency. But I was bigger, fueled by a primal fury, fighting for something infinitely more vital than any training could instill. We became a blur of motion, rolling across the floor, a brutal, desperate dance of flailing limbs and wild punches, sending furniture tumbling and lamps crashing. His hands, like vice grips, found my throat, squeezing, cutting off my air. A desperate, sharp elbow to his stomach bought me a precious second of reprieve. Just as Richard, eyes wailed with renewed intent, lunged for the fallen knife again, the door to the hallway burst open. Hotel security. 3 burly guards swarmed him, pulling him off me with practiced force. He thrashed, a pathetic, enraged animal screaming about his rights, about his baby, about how we had somehow stolen his life, his very existence. Minutes later, the wail of sirens culminated in the arrival of the local police. This time, it was different. This time, there was no room for doubt, no space for his manipulative lies. Breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted kidnapping, all unequivocally captured by the hotel's omnipresent security footage, a silent and blinking witness to his depravity. Is it really over? Becky kept asking, her voice a fragile whisper, her grip on Cassandra impossibly tight as she gave her statement. He can't get bail for this, can he? Detective Dooley, his gaze reassuring, shook his head firmly. Not this time, Becky, this time, he stays locked up. Day 81, Richard's trial. The courthouse was not merely full. It was packed to the rafters, a quiet, formidable assembly of women. Not just the attendees of that ill-fated baby shower, but a multitude of others who had known him, had suffered his insidious control. His ex-girlfriend from 2 years prior had flown in all the way from Oregon, her face etched with a quiet, fierce resolve to testify. She recounted months of relentless stalking, a suffocating campaign that had ultimately forced her to abandon every aspect of her life, to literally leave everything behind, just to escape his relentless grasp. One by one, in a somber procession, these women bravely stepped forward, their voices clear, telling their individual, yet eerily similar, stories. The patterns were always the same, a charming, almost intoxicating allure at first, slowly, insidiously morphing into controlling behaviors, then escalating into chilling violence the moment they dared to contemplate leaving. Richard sat there, stark and diminished in his orange jumpsuit, his facade of a concerned, heartbroken father utterly shattered, replaced by the hollow shell of a criminal. His lawyer, a desperate final attempt, tried to pivot to mental health issues, citing his military service. But the judge, unwavering, wasn't buying it. The verdict, 8 years in prison. When the words were read aloud, Becky openly wept with profound, cleansing relief, tears streaming down her face. Cassandra, oblivious and utterly safe, slept soundly through it all in her carrier, nestled close. Day 95. I was moving. My old apartment, once a haven, now felt subtly tainted, shadowed by the unsettling knowledge that Richard had been there, had watched me, his predatory gaze lingering from the outside. Becky and Cassandra, a surprising, welcome presence, arrived to help me unpack the boxes. An awkward silence often punctuated our efforts. We had been thrown together by a crisis, a shared crucible of fear and uncertainty, and now the crisis was, ostensibly, over. You saved our lives, Becky finally said, her voice soft but absolute, holding Cassandra close while I wrestled with the assembly of a flat-packed bookshelf. I don't even know how to begin to thank you. I shook my head, avoiding her gaze. You don't need to thank me, Becky, but she insisted. I do, though. You truly didn't have to do any of this. You could have simply walked away that very first day, when you saw the chaos. No, I replied, a quiet conviction in my voice. No, I truly couldn't have. We continued to work in a companionable, if slightly strained, silence for a while longer. Then Cassandra, a tiny, inquisitive hand reaching out, started making grabby motions towards me from Becky's arms. I instinctively took her, and she immediately, without hesitation, grabbed my nose, her small face alight with unadulterated laughter. She likes you, Becky observed softly, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips. Day 125. Becky texted me a short video clip of Cassandra, her infectious laughter bubbling over as she reacted to something on TV. We had been texting more often lately, a slow, organic progression. Not about the past, not about the fear, but about small, normal things, mundane details of everyday life. She even mentioned, almost casually, that she was finally sleeping through the night, a quiet triumph in itself. I realized, with a surprising pang, that I missed them both more than I had anticipated. Want to get coffee sometime? I texted back, a tentative invitation. When you have a sitter, she replied, a faint blush of anticipation coloring her words. I'd like that very much. Day 140. I ran into them, quite by accident, at the grocery store. It was the first time we'd crossed paths without a prearranged plan, a serendipitous encounter. Cassandra was nestled comfortably in her stroller, happily occupied with a colorful toy. Her eyes, wide and bright, found mine, and immediately, instinctively, she reached up, her tiny hands making those familiar, grabbing motions. She remembers you, Becky said, her smile warm and genuine, a soft glow in her eyes. She doesn't do that with everyone, you know, without a conscious decision. We began to shop together, our carts falling into an easy rhythm. We talked about normal, unremarkable things, fluctuating whether a movie she'd been wanting to see, Cassandra's latest milestone of starting to crawl. The conversation flowed effortlessly, a truly easy, natural connection. At the checkout, the cashier, a friendly older woman, smiled at Cassandra and then at us. Your daughter is adorable. Neither of us corrected her. Day 147. Cassandra's first birthday party. This time, it was held at Blake's house, a space filled with genuine joy, not the lurking shadow of fear. The living room buzzed with laughter and chatter, packed with people who had, through the crucible of shared trauma, forged an unbreakable bond, a true family. Lauren and Samantha were there, their presence a testament to resilience, along with other women from that first, terrible baby shower. Your family now, Blake told me, her hug tight and unwavering, her words a profound declaration. After everything, you're absolutely family. That day, amidst the joyous chaos, Cassandra took her very first steps, toddling precariously between Becky and me. her small legs propelled by pure delight. Everyone cheered, cameras flashed, capturing the fleeting, perfect moment. For a brief, shining instant, it felt exactly like the happy, uncomplicated celebration this should have been from the very beginning. Then, Becky's phone buzzed, a jarring intrusion, a prison call. Her eyes flickered to the screen, her expression hardening. Then she deliberately, defiantly, declined it. He doesn't get to ruin this day, she stated, her voice resolute, a protective shield against the past. The next morning, detectives duly called. Richard, he reported, had been hurt in a prison fight. He had, predictably, tried to exert his controlling behavior on the wrong inmate, a miscalculation that had landed him squarely in the infirmary. He'd recover, of course, but he'd be in solitary confinement for a considerable while. Hard to feel sorry for him, duly remarked, a dry note in his voice. And indeed, it was difficult to summon any pity. Yet, I also felt something else, something deeper. A profound sense of relief, a quiet satisfaction that, finally, in the cold, hard confines of prison, he was beginning to learn there were undeniable consequences for the way he treated people, for the havoc he wreaked on lives. Day 178. Becky and I were officially dating. It hadn't been a sudden leap, but a slow, deliberate evolution, built on a solid, yet raw foundation of shared trauma, gradually blossoming into something undeniably real and tender. Cassandra, with her innocent, unerring way, had started calling me Ree, a soft, sweet sound that resonated deep within my soul. Right now, tiny arms were reaching for me. Cassandra's joyful gurgles a sweet soundtrack to our burgeoning life together whenever I came over. We didn't dwell on Richard much, preferring to focus on the present, yet his phantom presence, like a persistent, chilling draft, was undeniably there. It manifested in the subtle rituals, how Becky would meticulously check the locks, not just once, but twice, sometimes even a third time. Her fingers tracing the cold metal as if searching for reassurance. It was evident in the way her shoulders would instinctively tense, her breath catching, whenever a truck rumbled by outside, its engine note or general silhouette momentarily resembling his, and the most stark testament to that lingering fear. The discreet, yet ever-present, canisters of pepper spray, strategically placed in almost every room, a silent sentinel against an unseen threat. Does it ever truly go away? She whispered one night, her voice thin with a vulnerability that pierced the quiet of the apartment. This fear. I paused, grappling with the weight of her question, searching for an answer I wasn't sure I possessed. I don't know, I admitted honestly, meeting her gaze, but it definitely gets smaller. Like a distant storm cloud shrinking on the horizon, its thunder still audible, but less menacing. Just 2 weeks after that raw, honest conversation about the fear gradually receding, and unwelcome truth slammed into our fragile peace, Richard, it seemed, wasn't done with us yet. Not directly, of course, he was still securely behind prison bars. But his malice, like a venomous tendril, found a new conduit, his mother. A process server, a grim harbinger of renewed turmoil, materialized at Becky's new apartment on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning. Cassandra was blissfully engrossed in her breakfast, mashed banana liberally decorating her face and the high chair, a tableau of innocent domesticity. When the knock came sharp and unexpected, Becky, thinking it was perhaps a maintenance worker, and latched the door without a second thought. Becky Martinez, the man inquired, his tone flat, devoid of emotion. Yes, she replied, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. Without another word, he thrust a thick stack of papers into her hands. You've been served. The words hung in the air, heavy with foreboding. She called me immediately, her voice a fragile tremor that spoke volumes of her shock and dread. Richard's mother, she choked out. She's suing for grandparent rights. The timing, to me, felt exquisitely, cruelly calculated. Just as we were beginning to tentatively breathe again, to anchor ourselves in a semblance of safety, this new legal assault came. Her previous calls, punctuated by faint terrors about Richard's drinking, now replayed in my mind as a sickening prelude, a manipulative smokescreen before this direct, legal strike. She wanted visitation with Cassandra. It wasn't just a legal claim, it was a psychological weapon. I drove over instantly, my mind racing. The papers were dauntingly thick, dense with convoluted legal jargon, yet the core message, once deciphered, was chillingly clear. Richard's mother asserted her right to see her granddaughter, framing Becky's refusal as an act of pure spite. But the DNA tests, I explained, my finger tracing the lines of the document, the absurdity of it all overwhelming. Richard isn't even the biological father. She's claiming emotional bonds, Becky said, her voice laced with incredulity. She says she prepared for this baby, bought things. That she has an established relationship. An established relationship. I thought, a rhetorical question screaming in my head. How could she possibly claim an established relationship when she had never, not once, even met Cassandra? It was an insult to our intelligence, a blatant fabrication. An hour later, Liz arrived, a stunning presence, with her lawyer in tow. They methodically pored over every page, the lawyer making swift, precise notes. This is harassment by proxy, he stated calmly, his voice cutting through our emotional turmoil like a scalpel. Richard can't sue from prison directly, so he's attempting to use his mother as a conduit, but she has no legal standing whatsoever. The DNA tests are unambiguous. His words were a bomb, a shield against the legal assault. True to his word, the case was dismissed with dismissive swiftness just 3 weeks later. The judge, clearly annoyed by the frivolous nature of the suit, barely allowed Richard's mother to finish her rambling, self-pitying plea before shutting it down. But the victory, though definitive, came at a steep price. We still had to show up, had to endure the cold formality of the courtroom, had to pay the exorbitant lawyer fees, and most painfully, had to relive the whole traumatic ordeal again. Even from the confines of his prison cell, Richard, it seemed, still possessed an uncanny ability to disrupt, to poison our lives. 6 months after that legal battle, a period of blessed, almost mundane normalcy settled upon us. Becky and I fell into the comforting rhythm of shared routines. Sunday dinners at Blake's welcoming house, Cassandra's giggles echoing through the park as we pushed her on the swings, cozy movie nights whenever we managed to snag a sitter. We were against all odds building something real, something rooted in shared joy and everyday life, not merely forged in the crucible of crisis. Then came day 360. We were at Riverside Park. Of all places, the very same park where I'd had the chilling confrontation with Richard so long ago. Cassandra, a beacon of pure delight, was feeding the ducks, her tiny hands flinging breadcrumbs and her squeals of excitement punctuating the air whenever the waterfowl waddled close. A man emerged from the parking lot, walking purposefully towards us. My breath hitched. He had Richard's approximate height, his general build, even a similar, slightly rolling gait. Becky's entire body instantly went rigid, a silent, primal alarm. She instinctively grabbed Cassandra, pulling her back against her side, shielding her. My own response was immediate. I stepped forward, positioning myself squarely between them and the approaching figure, my hands already clenching into fists. A silent, protective readiness coursing through my veins. Then a voice, unfamiliar yet distinctly ordinary, called out, "Tommy, Sarah, stop running so far ahead." Two children, a blur of motion, sprinted past us towards him. Just another dad at the park, not Richard at all. The tension, which had coiled so tightly within us, suddenly deflated. Becky and I looked at each other, and then, inexplicably, we started laughing. It wasn't happy laughter, not the kind that springs from joy. It was the raw, almost hysterical laughter that bubbles up when you realize, with a jarring clarity, just how deeply scarred you still are, how fragile your sense of security remains. Our hands, despite the relief, were trembling visibly. Cassandra, her bread offering forgotten, looked up at us, her small face creased with confusion, wondering why we'd abruptly ceased the duck-feeding ritual. 6 months of therapy, Becky murmured later that night, a wry, self-deprecating smile playing on her lips, and I still react like that. We both do, I gently reminded her, my hand finding hers. After Cassandra had finally drifted off to sleep, we talked about it, really talked. How certain abrupt sounds a truck engine revving too loudly, a door slamming unexpectedly still made us both jump, our hearts leaping into our throats. How we meticulously checked locks multiple times, a compulsive habit born of constant vigilance. We acknowledged that perhaps we'd always carry some small part of that fear, a faint echo of the trauma. But we're getting better, Becky insisted, a flicker of determination in her eyes. Slower than I'd like, maybe, but undeniably better. A month later, a profound clarity settled over me. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I wanted to marry Becky. And it wasn't born from trauma bonding, or the shared crucible of crisis, though those experiences had undeniably forged an unbreakable connection. No, it was because of the quiet, beautiful things, how she sang off-key lullabies to Cassandra every single night, even when exhaustion etched lines around her eyes. It was because of her truly terrible jokes that, despite their inherent lameness, somehow always managed to make me laugh. It was, most of all, because of the incredible strength, the quiet tenacity, with which she was rebuilding her life, brick by painstaking brick. I called Lauren and Samantha, conspirators in my grand plan. I want to propose at the baby shower venue, I announced, laying out my intentions. That's either really romantic or really weird, Lauren deadpanned, a slight incredulity in her voice. Both, I admit, I confessed with a grin, but that's where everything truly started, where our real, messy, wonderful story began. The venue itself had undergone a transformation, now under new management. The previous owner, I'd heard, had sold after to many incidents, a subtle nod to the chaos Richard had wrought. The new owner, blissfully unaware of its past significance to us, was perfectly happy to let us use it for a small gathering. I spun a tale for Becky, telling her we were headed to a friend's party. She was suspicious, of course, her keen intuition picking up on my poorly disguised excitement, but blessedly, she played along. When we walked in, the room was awash with familiar faces, a sea of warmth and unwavering support. Every single woman who had been at that terrible, fateful baby shower was there. Blake, Lauren, Samantha, every person who had stood by us. A testament to the enduring power of friendship and chosen family. What is this? Becky asked, her voice a mix of bewilderment and dawning realization. I got down on one knee, right there, on the very spot where she had been opening presents on that harrowing day. The precise place where Richard had walked in and irrevocably altered the course of our lives. We started here with a lie. I began, my voice thick with emotion, looking into her tear-filled eyes. To strangers, me agreeing to pretend to be your boyfriend, to pretend to be Cassandra's father. But somewhere along the way, somewhere amidst the fear and the fights and the quiet moments, it stopped being pretend. Just then, Cassandra, sensing a new, interesting game, toddled over, probably thinking I was playing on the floor. She reached out, her small hand finding my shoulder for balance, a perfect, unplanned anchor in that momentous instant. I love you, Becky, I said, my voice cracking slightly. I love Cassandra. I love the family we built, brick by brick, from something that should have utterly broken us. Will you marry me? She said yes, her tear-streaked face a mosaic of joy and disbelief. Everyone in the room erupted in cheers. Cassandra, catching the infectious enthusiasm, clapped her tiny hands, then, ever practical, promptly asked for a cookie. It was in every glorious, messy, authentic detail, perfect in its imperfection. 3 months later, we were married. A small, intimate ceremony held at Blake's house, the very same house where Brooks had once scattered windows, where we had huddled in fear, our lives seemingly crumbling around us. Now, it was transformed, adorned with delicate white flowers and twinkling fairy lights, a beacon of hope and new beginnings. Blake, a pillar of strength and love, walked Becky down the aisle, her own father having passed years ago. "You saved my daughter," she whispered to me at the altar, her eyes shining with ench tears. "You saved them both." Cassandra, her irrepressible flower girl, mostly just giggled and liberally scattered petals at anyone who caught her eye. Lauren and Samantha, steadfast as ever, stood proudly as Becky's bridesmaids. My college roommate, still perpetually bemused by the whirlwind of my life, served as my best man. It was a whirlwind, a mere blink of an eye, about how I'd gone from a single man to being married with a child in under 2 years. During the solemnity of our wedding vows, I remember looking deeply into Becky's eyes, a promise etched onto my soul, and saying, "I promise to protect you and Cassandra, to stand as an unyielding shield between you and any danger that dares to approach. I vow to be the father Cassandra so profoundly deserves, and the husband you, my love, truly need." Becky's vows, equally heartfelt and deeply moving, included words that echoed in the quiet space. "You chose us when you didn't have to. You stayed when the path grew perilous and dangerous. You loved us when we were broken, picking up the pieces. I promise to choose you back, every single day, without fail." Such was the raw, authentic emotion of that moment that even the efficient, a seasoned veteran of countless ceremonies, openly teared up, a testament to the powerful journey we had shared. The reception that followed was held in the familiar comfort of Blake's spacious backyard, transformed into a haven of joyous celebration. No one dared to explicitly mention Richard, yet his absence was its own palpable presence, a shadow lingering at the periphery of our collective consciousness. A security guard, a silent sentinel, stood discreetly at the front gate. Blake had hired him just in case, a chilling reminder of the past's insidious grip. There was the subtle flinch, the almost imperceptible tensing of Becky's shoulders when a car backfired loudly nearby, and the tiny, potent guardian of pepper spray nestled securely in a hidden pocket within her delicate bouquet. But mostly, overwhelmingly, it was just pure, unadulterated joy. Cassandra, with her boundless energy, danced with everyone, her laughter ringing like tiny bells. Blake, usually so stoic, cried tears of unburdened happiness, a release of pent-up worrying and relief. The incredible women from the baby shower, now cherished friends, delighted in recounting stories about how they had, in their own words, picked me out on the street. He just looked safe, Lauren declared during her heartfelt toast, her eyes sparkling. Like someone who'd instinctively step up, who'd bear the weight. Turns out, their intuition, bordering on prescience, was absolutely right. 2.5 years into Richard's sentence, a period we hoped would bring closure, we received the letter. A bureaucratic nightmare in an innocuous envelope. He was, astonishingly, up for early release. The official reasons listed were boilerplate, good behavior, completing anger management programs, all the right boxes checked. He's manipulating them, Becky stated, her voice laced with a bitter, all too familiar certainty as she crumpled the letter in her hand, the paper crinkling sharply. Just like he manipulated me, we knew then what we had to do. We had to testify at the hearing. So, too, did his other victims, a sisterhood forged in shared pain. The woman from Oregon, whose life he had irrevocably altered, flew in again. 2 other exes, women we had never met but whose stories echoed our own, bravely showed up. The courtroom was a sobering tableau, full of women Richard had hurt, a gallery of ghosts, each a testament to his cruelty. One by one, we stood, our voices clear and unwavering, explaining with meticulous detail why he should not be released. We laid bare his insidious patterns, his chilling escalation, how he had learned to skillfully work the system, not genuinely change his behavior. Richard sat there in his orange jumpsuit, looking smaller, somehow, a gaunt parody of his former self. Prison had undeniably aged him, etching lines of hardship onto his face. Yet, when his gaze, cold and unwavering, met Becky's, that same primal rage, that unyielding, predatory stare, was unmistakably there. His mother, a woman steeped in denial, sat in the gallery, glaring at us with fierce resentment. When the parole was finally, mercifully denied, she stood up, a raw, guttural cry of misplaced maternal anguish escaping her lips. "You've ruined his life," she screamed, her voice piercing the courtroom's solemn decorum, directed squarely at Becky. "He loved you. He just wanted his family." Security swiftly removed her enraged yelling about how we destroyed her son echoing down the hallway. Richard watched it all unfold with that same unnervingly placid smile, a mask of calculated indifference, and chilling echo of that first encounter in the coffee shop. Outside the courthouse, a quiet, powerful circle of solidarity formed as the other women gathered around Becky and me. "Thank you for stopping him," one said, her voice filled with a profound sense of gratitude. "I never could." "We stopped him together," Becky replied, her eyes sweeping over their faces, an acknowledgement of their shared victory. By the time Cassandra started preschool, her life, against all odds, looked almost normal. She was a beacon of confidence, happy, completely unaware of the terrifying genesis of her young life. She ran into her classroom that first day, a tiny explorer ready for adventure, without a single backward glance. "She's so brave," Becky said, a soft, knowing smile playing on her lips as she watched her daughter disappear into the cheerful chaos of the classroom. "She gets it from you." Becky was pregnant again, a testament to healing and hope. This time, it was planned, celebrated from the very first moment. There was no lingering fear about announcing it to the world, no dread about the impending baby shower. Blake, in a beautiful full circle, threw the shower at her house again. It was the same living room, yet it felt profoundly transformed, imbued with a new light and purpose. The windows had been replaced with reinforced glass, a silent guardian, a boundary against the lingering shadows of memory. Blake's one concession to the past, a tangible manifestation of his unwavering commitment to their safety. Otherwise, the atmosphere was simply pure, unadulterated joy. Lauren and Samantha were there, of course, their presence a given. They'd evolved from crisis allies, forged in the crucible of trauma, into real, genuine friends, a deepening tapestry of mutual support and affection. "Remember when we grabbed Ryan off the street?" Samantha mused, gently rubbing Becky's burgeoning belly, a playful jab yet underscored by profound truth. "Best random decision ever. Not random," Lauren corrected, her gaze firm. "We chose him." "We're excellent judges of character, aren't we?" The shower itself was wonderfully, blissfully boring. No drama, no anxious clock watching, no one covertly holding golf clubs and weapons. Just women eating cake, laughing, and playing silly games about guessing baby food flavors. When someone knocked on the door, only I tensed, a primal instinct, a muscle memory of fear flaring up. It was just the pizza delivery Blake had ordered, a mundane convenience, but that fleeting moment of fear, that vigilant sentry, would probably always be there, buried deep, yet ever ready to surface. Our son was born 2 months later, bringing even more light into our lives. We named him Marcus. Cassandra was utterly fascinated by her new baby brother, constantly wanting to hold him, feed him with a tiny spoon, and show him all her beloved toys. Marcus was 2 when Cassandra, now 5, smart and incredibly observant, started asking harder questions. Her sharp, inquisitive mind was beginning to connect dots, noticing subtle differences other kids at school talked about. We were teaching her to ride a bike in front of our house, a quintessential slice of suburban bliss. I was running beside her, my hand firmly on the seat for support, when she stopped abruptly, shattering the idol. "Why doesn't Marcus have a different daddy?" she asked, her voice clear and innocent, yet posing a perfectly innocent, profoundly complex query. Emma at school has 2 daddies, her first daddy and her new daddy. Becky and I had prepared for this very moment. Months of therapy sessions, countless hushed conversations with counselors about how to handle it. But in that instant, all our rehearsed lines, all our carefully crafted narratives, seemed to dissolve into thin air. Becky, with an innate grace, knelt down to Cassandra's level, meeting her gaze directly. "You do have a daddy, sweet pea," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The best daddy, who chose to love you even before he knew you." She paused, knowing the next part was delicate. "Kids, with their innocent wisdom, see right through you sometimes. Marcus was born after Daddy and I got married," Becky explained gently. "You were born before, but Daddy loved you so much, he chose to be your daddy even before you were in our lives." Cassandra pondered this for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration, the idea settling softly within her. "So, I'm special because I was chosen?" she asked, her little voice full of no understanding. "Exactly," I affirmed, reinforcing the cornerstone of her identity, our love. She seemed satisfied with that answer, the profound differentiator. "Okay, can we bike more now?" As I ran beside her bike again, holding on then letting go, watching her wobble, a precarious dance of independence, but ultimately stay upright, a wave of recollection washed over me. I thought about that fateful day, to strangers calling my name, their faces etched with a desperation I could feel across the street. I thought about how saying yes to that insane request, that leap into the unknown, had changed absolutely everything, a pivotal, universe-altering decision. Richard would be eligible for parole again in 3 years, a looming date on the calendar, a distant thunder. His mother still sent letters sometimes, though we didn't open them, their venomous contents left unread, sealed away like the trauma itself. The trauma, I knew, would always be an indelible mark, a shadow woven into the intricate fabric of our existence. But watching Cassandra pedal away, her laughter a joyous melody, calling for me to watch her, I knew with unwavering certainty that we'd won, not merely survived, but thrived. We had won not because Richard was in prison, not because we were safe, but because we had built something profoundly beautiful from something utterly terrible. The way Cassandra had asked why Marcus didn't have a different daddy was a testament to how kids, with their keen, almost philosophical insight, notice the patterns in their world, piecing together the intricate tapestry of their family structure. I wondered if she'd been quietly thinking about this question for a while, or if it had just clicked for her, a poignant, unexpected moment of clarity, while learning to bike. "Daddy, look, no hands," Cassandra called out. A daring declaration of newfound freedom, immediately wobbling. I ran to catch her, just as I always would, an unwavering promise, a lifetime of catches. It was a conviction, a silent well almost, that had taken root the very first day, blossoming into an unwavering commitment that guided my every subsequent step. That initial spark, ignited under circumstances I couldn't have predicted, became a guiding star illuminating a path I knew, deep down, was meant for me. Indeed, isn't it profoundly true that the strongest, most resilient, and undeniably best families are often not those dictated by the mere accident of birth, but rather the constellations of souls we meticulously, lovingly choose to orbit? These are the ties that bind not through genetics, but through shared understanding, unwavering support, and a mutual decision to belong, forming a tapestry far more vibrant and enduring than any predetermined pattern. Consider the paradox. This profound journey began with a rather outlandish proposition from a complete stranger, a shadowy figure perhaps, or an unassuming individual with an urgent, almost desperate plea asking me to weave a delicate fabric of lies, to perform a daring masquerade, to step, blindfolded almost, into an abyss of danger whose depths I couldn't possibly fathom, a perilous charade I'd barely grasp. Yet, even knowing the labyrinthine paths I'd traverse, the whispered falsehoods I'd utter, and the precipice of peril I'd skirt, would I hesitate, not for a single heartbeat. I would, with unwavering certainty, embrace that same choice, that same risk, every single time, without exception. It's a decision etched into the very fiber of my being, one I would never retract. So, my wonderful listeners, my fellow travelers on this journey of thought, it seems our time together for today is drawing to a close. We've reached the final station on this particular intellectual expedition, and what a fascinating ride it has been. I must confess, it has been an absolute delight, a genuine blast, if you will, to wander through the intricate landscapes of these ideas and revelations alongside each and every one of you. Much like explorers charting unknown, yet captivating, territories. My sincerest hope is that you found the questions we posed, the dilemmas we explored, and the insights we uncovered to be as thought-provoking and utterly captivating as I found them to be in the process of sharing. And before you click away, if you've resonated with anything shared today, if even a single thought sparked a flicker of recognition or curiosity, please do consider giving this video a quick like. Why does it matter, you might ask? Because that seemingly simple click is far more powerful than you could ever imagine. It's the digital nod that tells algorithms this content is valuable, pushing it out to new eyes, fostering further discussions, and helping to cultivate this vibrant community we're building. It's a small gesture with a ripple effect that truly extends further than you think, making a tangible difference.